start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm here, Spin, and I'm joined by my co-host Rex. And Rex, I asked you this last weekend, so I guess I'll just kind of do the same. How was your weekend? Maybe expecting the answer.
Yeah, it was another frustrating weekend, Ben. I mean, 2-0 really is the most dangerous scoreline to have
Yep. Hmm.
because it's twice in a row now that Arsenal have blown it, and I guess it's down to these are still young players. Maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't know. I mean, we got the head-to-head with City coming up, and I still don't think head-to-head. I don't think we can beat City. 4-point lead with the game in hand. It's getting really tight. We'll delve into that game later, but it was a really frustrating weekend, Ben. And Brentford is starting to slide too. They're another team I follow, and it was a tough game for them as well. So it was a frustrating weekend for me, Ben. But I think it looks like you had a good Monday watching Liverpool put up another touchdown, right?
I did have. I'm a little bit in better spirits than last weekend. I think because I was able to kind of get the yard cut. So I think there's less pollen out, so I was in better spirits that way. But yeah, like you said, yesterday was a bit of a shocker. But when we get to that game, we were kind of talking about before the show started. We're probably going to spend a little bit more time on Leeds because that game for Liverpool. I mean, it's a nice kind of pick me up. It was I called it basically, an eating day essentially. But I mean that's really all it was. I mean they were able to get a lot of goals, but in the big scheme of things, they're still. I mean they were 8 points in the table to start the game, and I think they're still 8 points. I think it's like a 9 point gap now. So I mean, but there was something that happened with Trent Alexander-Arnold, which I'll maybe spend a little time on. But you're right. I mean, there was at least enjoyable, at least from my perspective. But the team that they played, I think, are basically playing themselves out of the league, which we'll get
Mm,
into as well.
yeah.
We're gonna get started with this pretty quickly. I mean, I don't really have a story of the week. Basically, I was just thinking it's scary to do a weekly show of hot takes because so many narratives are changing week to week now. It's hard to really kind of stay on something and be consistent with it because it's really easy to see something completely change your mind. And we're seeing that basically with the entire relegation race, but also maybe with the top four race as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My story's going to be Villa, high flying under Emery.
Good one.
He was
Yep.
kind of a bit of a laughing stock at Arsenal his first year. Again, we talked about before. It was a bit of a language barrier kind of thing. But Villa are flying right now. They've won their last five, and they're in sixth place. And they're starting to put a little bit of pressure on. Maybe not quite Man U yet, but they're starting to put pressure on Newcastle and Tottenham for that fourth and fifth spot. I mean, Emery's very experienced in Europa League, especially with Villarreal. So this would be an interesting team if they did manage to get into one of those Europa League spots. They could cause some havoc next year in that competition potentially.
And as well, I mean, we talked about that when they hired him. We didn't know what exactly he was joining for. I mean, I think he joined them when they were in 16th. And
Yeah,
they really did look like they were going to be one of those teams that was going to be kind of in this little race too. And you're right. He's taken something like since he's joined, I think they've taken third most points in the league. And what's funny is they've kind of mirrored a little bit what Eddie Howe and Newcastle did last season. So it was fitting that they played each other yesterday. We will touch on that, but we're gonna get started with Man City and Leicester. And this is kind of boring, but it sets us up for what happened on Sunday. Man City does go on to win 3-1. They had three goals basically after the first 20 minutes. You wondered if they were going to put a big number on Leicester. And then basically Man City stopped playing a little bit. Pep did something he normally doesn't do, which shows you he's taken Champions League, even though they have a 3-0 lead over Bayern, pretty seriously because he kind of subbed off his entire team basically at the 70th minute mark. Leicester were awful, but it looked like, and they started
yeah,
off basically playing, a back, a back five with basically four. It was basically a block of 4 and 5, so a back nine, essentially, with like Vardy to maybe make some runs. So they couldn't find Vardy. They couldn't get Madison the ball in that first half. And once they started to play a little bit, they brought Nacho on in the second half. They actually made Man City fans think a little bit. And if it wasn't for Ederson, this maybe could have been something different, to be honest, because he made a couple really big saves and a couple really bad finishes by Leicester that final 20 minutes. That final 20 minutes, they gave it a go. And Man City basically had stopped playing at that point, so that factored in as well. But this was interesting, at least towards the end.
Yeah, they managed to win the second half at least, and being down 3-0 25 minutes in at halftime, I'm sure that the captains and the coaches were like, "Hey, let's try to win the second half at least," and they did. They won the second half. Maybe a bit of that, or a decent amount of that, is City kind of taking their foot off the gas a little bit, which is to be expected. But if you're a Leicester fan, you can take pride in that second half at least. But I think most of it was just City shutting down
Mhm.
after really just winning the game in the first 25 minutes, really. So it's good. It's good for Pep. I'm sure he was very happy to be able to rest his players too, because I'm sure he's not discounting Bayern yet in the second half of the tie here. So it's big to be able to rest players, and they're still on a roll. I find them unbeatable right now.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
this one could have been a lot worse. I think if they had just gone for the throat and kept people in, it could have been, or yeah, Leicester could have finished better, but that's been kind of plaguing them all year. But yeah, it was good. It was good for City, and they continue to roll. They're a scary team, especially for me. Sitting only 4 points above them, and we're playing them after this Southampton game Friday. They're next, so I don't know. It's a concern for me, Ben. Holland too is still on fire. He managed 2 goals in basically 10 minutes. So
And there was they get the first goal with an insane volley, but by John Stones. A center back should not be able to do what he did. I mean, the defending wasn't great,
yeah,
but that was a great finish. And then it was kind of
unbelievable.
unlucky with a handball. But I think the bigger problem, at least for that second goal, or the second goal that was a PK. Is Leicester playing the back five, and it's just Kevin De Bruyne doing a switch, and I don't know why Jack Grealish is able to get the ball all the way in the wing, completely unmarked. You're playing a back five. What's the point of having a wing back or a wide fullback if Ksenia is just going to stay in the box? So I just thought it was very, people say pragmatic. I think stupid to just allow City to kind
Mm,
of set up camp. Basically, 35 yards from goal, and Leicester where it seemed like that was the game plan, just kind of sitting back and maybe try to make this ugly until the final 20 minutes. If I'm a Leicester fan, if I'm Madison, if I'm Tielemans finally got a start. So it was good to see him return. He's going to need to help them,
mm,
I think, coming down the
yeah,
stretch. Is
yeah, definitely.
I don't, if I'm a player, I don't know if I like hearing that. Now you've been in a kind of a situation where playing the kind of play that Rogers was playing wasn't really working either. But I mean, this seemed almost basically like they were waving a white flag before the game even started. And I think that kind of showed up as well. And it wasn't necessarily the strongest Man City team. No Ake. I mean, Ake was rested. Gunnigan was rested. And then I think maybe I'm going to take a different take than you. I think you saw that Man City isn't as deep as people will think. You can bring on some names. People will recognize the names. But I mean, Laporte, I don't think is the player he used to be. I think he can be got at. When Gomez came on, Leicester had fun with him. Calvin Phillips, when he came on for Rodri, Calvin Phillips basically looks like he's just cashing a check these
Mm,
days. When that City team has to play without Rodri, it's a different team. I think it's a different team without Kevin De Bruyne. And they don't really have the depth until maybe Foden gets back. So Man City's got
mm,
a lot more games than Arsenal. They have an FA Cup coming up. FA Cup game coming up. Now it is against Sunderland, but if they win that, then they'll have an FA final to deal with. Who knows what they're going to have to do with Champions League? They were going to play Brighton this
yeah,
weekend, and that's going to be rescheduled. So when is
mhm,
that game going to be fit in? That's going to be a hard game for
yeah.
Man City too. So I don't necessarily know if this is done and dusted. Like I'm a little more upbeat than maybe you.
Mm. Oh, that's a good point about them not being as deep as they were. They were definitely certainly much deeper last year, because basically you had kind of basically this team, but then you add Jesus and Zinchenko, so they definitely
Right.
had more depth last
Pep
year for sure.
Pep in the past has almost done where when they made the final, when the Champions League final, I remember Pep was basically playing two teams. He had a team. He had 11 for for league games, and he had basically an 11 for Champions League games. And Sterling was like
Yeah,
starting for like one, and then you're right, Jesus would start for the other. And I do not think that they necessarily have that right now. So
yeah.
and
Well, for a couple of years, it could almost in practice we could look at them and be like, you could play 11v11, and it would be a good matchup. Like your second starting 11 could put up a fight against your primary starting 11. But yeah, definitely not the case this year. Some younger guys too, and yeah, just not as talented. Calvin Phillips hasn't really panned out either, so there's another big reason. And then yeah, Foden appendicitis, so he should be coming back soon. But yeah,
They'll
but
need him.
without Foden, I mean,
Yeah, because
yeah, they will.
Grealish is playing too many games or too many minutes,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
absolutely.
I mean, we're
Yeah,
gonna. He's kind of turned me around. I used to kind of be a little bit more of a doubter. He has had a spectacular run of form since the World Cup, but he is playing a lot of
he's getting better
minutes.
and better.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he
Uh,
does need rest. Yeah, looking at the bench too, against Leicester on Saturday, the only two people really that could hurt you coming off the bench would be, in my opinion, Alvarez and Gundogan. I mean, Ake and Akanji are good options to have too, but there's really only like two guys that could influence the game or change the game attacking wise. And well, I mean, maybe Rico Lewis, but yes, yeah, you're right. There's not as much depth. Maybe that'll come in factor with all these games coming up. We'll see. But Pep's done a good job resting people. Maybe this is part of the
Yeah,
reason why too.
especially De Bruyne, which you have mentioned.
Yeah,
I mean, look at the stats. I mean, XG was Man United, Man City two.
couple people.
Leicester was actually paced them in XG. Now again, they stopped playing after about the 60th minute mark. But the shots was 12 and only four. It was four shots in the first half. And let's see, Leicester had 10 and four, and they had seven shots in the second half. When they brought Iheanacho on, they gave it a go. They had three chances, three big chances, and two missed in the second half. So this game really, because of Man City basically trying to kind of take the final 20 minutes off, they played into their own almost played into their own downfall a little bit. But I mean, it is. They like you said, the game was basically run, so it didn't really matter. I
Yeah.
mean, to keep the focus on City, Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne both might actually break records with kind of assisting that the Kevin De Bruyne is doing. And Haaland, I think,
Yeah.
has tied Mo Salah now. So I think he's only maybe
Uh,
one or two away from Andy Cole and Shearer for I think the all time. Now I don't think when Shearer did it, it was the EPL, but I might be wrong about that. I thought Salah actually had the tying record. But
yeah.
they
Uh,
kept saying that Shearer had the record at 34, and I think he's tied with Andy Cole.
yeah.
Obviously, that's probably going to happen unless something really unfortunate happens to his health. And to do this again, at least it took him till April. We were kind of wondering if he was going to get it, maybe in March or even earlier.
Yeah.
The way
Yeah,
things
we
have been
were.
going, yeah. I mean, let's see. And I think to keep the focus on Holland. I remember kind of saying I think it was not necessarily the start of the year, but it was after like the Bournemouth game when people were actually maybe starting to kind of doubt him a little bit because I remember there was a graph people were kind of comparing him to Lukaku because he only had like
Oh,
four touches in the first half and basically one was like a kickoff. Um,
mm,
but
yeah.
I remember basically saying he'll score 20 a game or 20 a season easily. And I think I maybe sold him a little short, because he, basically had 20 basically, I don't know, in November, maybe before the World Cup, and it's looking like, I should have, I should have doubled that a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, who knew though? I mean, because there were like it hasn't just been straight up, like a straight incline. It's been little dips in form where he hasn't scored, and little hiccups where he's gone periods of time where he hasn't really scored. But yeah, like throughout the course of the season, the whole season, he's just managed to put up a ton of goals, and it's really incredible. Not only in the EPL but Champions League as well. He at times is putting the scoring at least on his back,
Oh,
and
five
he's
in a
he's
five in a
done well.
game or whatever, maybe it was six, in the, versus Leipzig, in one of them.
Yeah, just unbelievable numbers, yeah. I think it was 5, I think, but
But what's so crazy is like so many of the goals really have just been like kind of tap-ins and putaways. The second goal that he scored, and obviously he's been able to convert his PKs. The second goal really is good by him though. It's a fantastic through ball by Kevin De Bruyne, but the run and the first touch that he does to get by uh, Phase and Suter. Now again, when we get to
mhm,
Leicester, that pretty much has been their back line is not good. You can play a back three, you can play a
yeah,
back five or whatever. If you're not going to be able to stop a guy running behind you when you already have like an 8 yard head start, you're going to give up a lot of goals, and that's really what happens. But the first touch that he has
yeah,
basically to get the ball ahead, so he can still run onto the ball with full stride without actually having to stop his pace and it's a really good finish. That is a class goal. And
Yeah, absolutely.
you're seeing the goal he scored last week with the insane like somersault kick. He can score.
Oh,
He's not just a tap and merge it as I've seen. People maybe have some fun online. I think people are just trying to find something to criticize him with, uh,
yeah,
because
yeah,
he's starting to set up his teammates too. Starting to get a couple assists in there as well. Um,
definitely.
I mean, for Leicester, do you think do you think Dean Smith can come in and somehow do a save job, maybe do what Roy Hodgson has done, or do you think you penciled them in last week? Obviously, this maybe doesn't give you a whole lot of confidence after that.
No, yeah, no, not at all. But I mean, I guess, yeah, in Leicester's defense, and you mentioned it, they did have a couple chances to really make things interesting. I don't know. Obviously, they're only 2 points out, because their goal differential isn't that bad. It's a lot better than the people around them. But I don't know. I think I would have had more confidence in them just keeping Rodgers to get out of relegation zone at this point, bringing in Dean Smith, who he's had success at times, but I mean he's kind of been large a championship manager, so I don't know. We'll see. Like it's different than like bringing in Deitch, who is known for organizing his defense and just being hard to break down. It's different than that. So I don't know. I think I kind of think it's a mistake, but they could easily have been relegated keeping Rodgers too. It might be one of those situations where it doesn't really matter who's the coach. The players are just have lost it, and it doesn't matter who's coach; they're going to get relegated. But I don't know. I mean, I would have liked Rodgers to try to get him out of this, but it's just not enough time. It's not a lot of time at all for Dean Smith to try to
It's a weird, yeah.
get
It's
something out of these games.
I think it's a weird. I do think it's a weird situation, but what the thing that surprised me is, I, I mean, with Rogers, people maybe obviously everything isn't. You can't necessarily look at what a team did back in November or October, whenever it was they played, but they did play this Leicester side 2-1-0. Or and I mean it was a hard game for City. I think the only goal was from a Kevin De Bruyne free kick, essentially. So it wasn't
Mhm.
even an open play. Now Holland didn't play that day, if I recall
Right.
right. But it was weird to see how much different this was. It was also weird to see just immediately starting out with a back five, and Smith didn't necessarily have the best time of it towards the end of his Aston Villa time, but I thought that was more just
Yeah.
not being able to replace Jack Grealish. I thought when they had Grealish, they were decent defensively, and they were actually somewhat front-footed. Now, they gave Grealish a free roll. Maybe they can give Madison a free roll, but I didn't understand the whole idea of going in. Maybe that was just kind of a throwaway game. I don't really know. I think they have the players to do
Yeah.
it. If they can find a way to get Daka, Madison, and Iheanacho playing together, playing some stuff together, they can score enough goals to I think win a couple games to keep out. Another thing I want to say is Ndidi has come back from health. He's basically missed a lot of this game too. This guy used to be considered in the top 3 when it came to at least being a defensive-minded defensive midfielder. Now, he's never really had the best
Mhm.
touch. He's always kind of been poor with the ball at his feet, but at least when it's come to tackling and just kind of, being a presence, he used to be top. And, he's hard done by, for the PK, so I'm not necessarily gonna go at him for that with his arm kind of being outstretched. I have a problem with the
Yeah.
3rd goal that Man City score when Kevin De Bruyne basically beats him in a duel. Indeed, he just kind of just goes into it kind of weak, and I just, he's gonna have to be a little bit more, a little stronger in these challenges, and he needs to find his form back because if he can, again, he can be one of the better DMs in the league. Now
I
I
think
know he's
so.
had some injuries and whatnot. Maybe he hasn't necessarily been able to recover. Maybe he's lost some confidence. He needs to regain that confidence. If he can find that form, I do think Leicester have enough to stay up.
I'll tell you what, Ben. I'm looking at this schedule, Leicester's, and it's really not too bad.
It's good. It's
The
good.
next three, especially the next four, really, it's Wolves, Leeds, Everton, and Fulham.
Yeah.
Not bad if you can get some points there. It's Liverpool and Newcastle after that, which isn't great, but then they finish with West Ham. So they're not only are they playing, some worse teams, but they're
Playing
playing
teams
some
near them.
teams that are in the
Yeah.
relegations, yeah, with them. So it really is. It's all there to play for. Looking at the schedule, I'm kind of more leaning towards, hey, maybe Dean Smith can get something out of these, games. Because if they get what 6 points out of their next three games, that would really make things interesting. Especially beating Everton and beating Leeds, it could completely, push them up at the table and put Everton and Leeds in that zone. So, not a bad schedule, Ben. Yeah, maybe they can do it.
I mean, I made a joke that Ian must be the worst trainer, you just alive, because it just doesn't make sense why, Rodgers wasn't really playing him until
Yeah,
basically, Daka and, Vardy got injured, and that was actually the stretch when Leicester started to kind of go on a bit of a good form, if you
that's
remember, like,
right.
they
Yeah,
smashed Spurs. So find a way to play that guy because things change when he plays. Now I don't care what he does in training. He leads to goals, in my opinion. And
yeah,
have Vardy on as a change a change of pace guy for the final 20 minutes. I don't understand why you
yeah,
can't do that. Vardy
yeah.
starting the last couple
Vardy,
three games
he
hasn't
shouldn't be
done
starting.
anything right.
Yeah, yeah, he hadn't done anything all year. Yeah, he should not be starting at all. I don't. Maybe Iheanacho, like he creates chances, and he's not the best finisher at times. We've seen him miss some pretty big, easy chances. Maybe that's part of the reason, but still,
I have a feeling
creating chance
I have a feeling it's
is
off the
more than
ball.
what Hardy does.
He maybe doesn't press. I haven't necessarily watched a ton of that though. I thought,
Mm.
he
Yeah,
he
Andy.
him and Madison pressed City into a mistake. Madison actually had a chance to again had a chance to really make this 3-2. It's a fantastic save by Ederson. Ederson's actually stepped
Yeah.
up for them in the last 3 games. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
and we'll move on to West. We started with that game because of this game. What did Arsenal do to follow up with Man City and in a weird way, kind of copied them a little bit, which we'll get to later. But West Ham and Arsenal, and the second time for Arsenal to play away, and a second time, like you said, where they got an early 2-goal lead. I mean, really early. I think Odegaard's goal came in the 10th minute. It's a fantastic finish by Odegaard. It's another really good setup by Martinelli. And the first goal that Arsenal scored, this was like FIFA like. It was just the way they were able to play through the lines. Another really good pass by Odegaard. So basically he had a pre-assist to Ben White, and Ben White just had a square ball to Jesus. It looked like West Ham had no idea how to defend on the wide areas in that first 10 minutes, and Odegaard, really showed up in that first 10 minutes because I was kind of getting on him a little bit last week, and then something weird happened. I think the takeaway from me is how, because I'll just pause it here. If I had woken up, I had missed the game and woken up and seen the score, I would have been like, it's an away game. Maybe West Ham just kind of, picked a rabbit out of a hat kind of thing. After watching it and then watching it, experiencing it live, still am trying to comprehend how this happened, how the team that played in the first 10 minutes ended up coming back because West Ham were all over the place. It looked like Arsenal could do whatever they wanted. And then I don't know if you felt the same way, Rex. It seemed like Arsenal had all this possession, but it was toothless. They stopped trying to get that third. And that in a
Yeah,
weird way, it almost played into them. And they get the PK basically by Partey, being poor with the ball at his feet. Declan Rice kind of presses him into a turnover. They give away the PK. And, before you knew it, it was 2-1 at halftime.
yeah. It's a game again. And the thing that I thought was very, very interesting is, I mean, you kind of saw what City did. They were two up very early, and they went on and got the third goal, which can most of the time kill the game off essentially. And like you said, Arsenal weren't able to do that. I mean, credit West Ham for completely turning things around, but you would think Arsenal up 2-0, learning last week the lesson of, hey, 2-0 is not, that doesn't mean we're going to win. We need to keep trying. We need to put away a third, maybe even a fourth. And they weren't able to. It was very frustrating. I mean, because I think if they score a third goal here, it's kind of like the
It's done
City
and
game.
dusted.
Maybe
Yeah.
West Ham grab one and it's, yeah, 3-1. And maybe they can cruise a little bit in the second half. Because, it's a young squad. There's some injuries. They, at times need to be rested as well. So it was just kind of disappointing. It was, they should have learned the lesson from last week. And, I mean, and they didn't. And it's, what is it? Four, it's four blown points in back to back weeks. Well, 4 points total in these 2 weeks, but back to back weeks, points blown. It's disappointing. And this one really did feel like a loss, more so than the Liverpool one for me personally. But I mean, it could have been a loss too. We had some more good Ramsdale saves, so I don't know. They got to figure it out. It's getting so tight with the game in hand. If City win, it's only 1 point. So I don't know. Crunch time's coming up. We got some young players still. It might just be the youth shining through. I don't know. We'll see. But it's going to be tight, Ben. It's going to be nerve wracking if you're an Arsenal fan or if you're a City fan too.
I think the interesting thing was to see now a little bit of the lineup. There was some lineup news, and that actually I do think played a role into this. Zinchenko wasn't able to go, so we saw Tierney. In the beginning, I was like, oh, maybe Tierney, Zinchenko's maybe being punished a little bit for that Trent Alexander-Arnold thing at the end, and no, looked like he had a groin issue. And obviously that's that sometimes like that area can't. It's not easy to necessarily let heal quickly. So we'll see if they have him for Southampton,
Yeah.
for because it is a quick turnaround. But the thing that I saw was it seemed Arsenal were trying to do the exact same play that they have. If they had their full 11. Now you don't have Saliba. You have Holding and Gabriel with the ball at their feet are not. I thought Gabriel did not enjoy being pressed. I thought that was basically the change. West Ham started doing basically what Leicester did. I thought they were basically just kind of sitting back, and it was kind of pointless to sit back because they weren't really defending. So in these basically about the 20th minute mark, it seemed like that changed. Declan Rice maybe by himself was like, "Fuck f this, I'm going to actually press." And once they started to actually press Arsenal a little bit, it wasn't as easy for them to kind of play from the back. And I do think Tierney did a decent job, but he's not
Mhm.
Zinchenko, and I think you saw Party isolated, a little bit more, and he was uncomfortable in a way we haven't really seen, really all season, and it was weirdly a chance I ended up tweeting, maybe even before this, I thought this was maybe a game for Zinchenko to come on in the second half just because of that, not Zinchenko, Jorginho, and we actually did see that. It was maybe a little bit too late because Party struggled a little bit in this game that we hadn't really seen. So
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Picked up that yellow card too. It was tough in there, playing against basically Rice and Suchek, some good defensive mids in their own right. So maybe that has a little bit to do with it as well. But yeah, and a little bit of a struggle. And I mean, I was kind of surprised. I was obviously surprised to see Tierney, but I was happy. Like he is not Zinchenko, but he had a crucial tackle, a slide tackle at the end of the game too, that might have saved a goal.
yeah.
I just he's one of my favorite players, so I really do like him. But I mean, the one thing too is that Saka PK miss. I mean that could have made it 3-1, and that would have probably dusted the game. And then literally
Yeah,
seconds, a minute later, West Ham scored the equalizer. So obviously that's a huge miss. But I don't necessarily put it all on Saka. There's several other PK takers that could have taken it.
I was
I mean,
surprised.
Odegaard maybe. Like
I was
there's a lot of
surprised by that.
others.
Now I know he Saka was the one that took it versus Liverpool, but I was trying to think when the last time Arsenal even had a PK, and I was struggling. And usually when a team is competing for a title, Holland's had 2 or 3 PKs in the last I want to say 3 or 4 games,
Yeah.
just maybe even more than that. It feels like Arsenal haven't had many PKs given to them, which is kind of
I
weird.
think I think Jesus took the last PK and made it. It was like when he was coming back from his injury, and I think they just wanted him to get a goal to kind of heat up. I think he was the last one to take a PK,
But that's
and he
just
made it.
right. But I mean, have Arsenal had more than 5 PKs given to them this season?
That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, they seem to not get that many, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it was just and unfortunate. You missed it wide. He didn't even force the keeper to make a save. You experienced a little bit what I experienced last week with Salah. And it was. I thought honestly, I thought it was kind of a weak PK to be given. To be
Mhm.
honest, but that really was crushing, and like you said, basically 3 minutes later, they do concede the second to Bowen, and another thing that's problematic here is it just comes from a throw in, and, Gabriel is the first one to, like, win the header, and I don't know if you saw this, Rex? So he's the first one to win the header. It's a good header. He goes, like, 25 yards out. Uh, but what's weird is he immediately tries to like push up by himself. So he like runs up like 6 yards, and it's or jogs up 6 yards, and he leaves everyone else. And it just doesn't really make sense because no one else decides to do that. Everyone else is kind of just staying there. And then when
Yeah, true.
Timo Kerr just kind of loops the ball back in over everyone, there's absolutely no one near Jared Bowen. So all it took was Bowen just kind of getting the right contact and. uh, Unfortunately for Ramsdale, he does get a hand to it, but he hits it to
Yeah.
the post and it banks in.
It's just a rocket. Ben, I pulled up the PKs this year, and Arsenal are seventh. They've been given four PKs only, and they scored three. Number one, two, and three all have eight, and it's West Ham, Brentford, and City, Man City. So not surprising there.
Right. When you hear about a team chasing a title, you expect them to probably be up there when it comes to PKs. So I'm not necessarily going to say that there's anything to that. I found that surprising, and I was also surprised
Interesting,
that
for sure.
it
Yeah,
was Saka taking the kick. Now, I get that he wants to revenge himself for what happened in Europa. But he's young, and personally I would not want someone under 22 to be taking pretty serious kicks coming down the stretch.
yeah,
Now I know he believes in himself, but was weird to me, and I feel like it was unfortunate for him because that's going to lay on his shoulder. Um,
yeah. If they don't win, you can point to that. If they don't win the title, and Odegaard's a captain too. I would have just gone with my captain, my number 10, taking it personally. But
and I think to kind of I guess maybe stick a little bit to the actual just first takes is. West Ham did, I think, play Arsenal, I think, in the first game back after the World Cup, and they were leading 1-0 at halftime. So I don't necessarily know if Arsenal were players were like, they saw where West Ham was in the table, especially after the first, 10 minutes where you're up 2-0. It did seem like they did feel like the game was won. They didn't try to, like you said, try to go for the throat. But in that game in December, I guess Boxing Day. Weirdly enough, Nketiah, I don't know if you remember him, basically announced himself that day. You
mhm.
didn't. It was one of those games without Jesus, maybe the first one, and they had him on the bench. I honestly feel like because the way Arsenal were just kind of they were playing around West Ham's area all in that entire second half. I think the stats was like 70% in Arsenal's favor. They had no one to really cross the ball into. There was no real threat. I feel like that was a game to maybe bring Nketiah on. I think he did get like 5 minutes. I feel like you could have brought him on a little earlier.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think honestly, I think most of the subs, I felt like Arteta could have possibly pulled the trigger a little earlier because things are starting to really go West Ham's way, and he could have brought on maybe Trossard a little earlier as well, and Keita too. So I don't know, but I mean maybe he just didn't want to do a whole lot of subs and just disrupt the team flow, I guess. But everything was already kind of disrupted anyway, so I thought he should have pulled the trigger on the subs a little earlier.
Yeah, because I mean,
And Ketia too.
because he did bring on Trossard, and he even brought on
Yeah,
Vice Nelson,
yeah,
which
Reece and Fabio Vieira. It was
so
just too late for me though.
I kind of agree. I mean,
Mm,
one thing to also say, speaking of, again, everything is different, from month to month, year to year. But it was very funny, at least from my perspective, how it was almost basically an entire year ago, where Man City also had to go to West Ham, and Mahrez actually missed a really big PK
that's
to
right.
make it 3-2. That what actually gave Liverpool fans hope. So maybe there's
Oh,
something
mhm.
about that ground, to be honest. But
Maybe.
yeah. I mean the stats: West Ham 1.75, Arsenal 2.8 for XG shots. West Ham did outshoot Arsenal 16, only 3 on target. Arsenal with 11 and 5, but all that possession, and I think it was just 4 shots for Arsenal in that first half, which I did
Mm.
find that surprising.
Yeah, they need to kill the game off. I mean, and they're still not necessarily. I mean, today or Sunday was better. 11 shots, 5 on target is better than some of the shots on target for shots ratio. But man, I mean, yeah, they 400 more passes, 72% possession. There was a point in the first half where it was 80% possession Arsenal, and it was 2-0, and I was like, done and dusted, easy game. We can rest some players. We can get
Yeah.
some maybe get Emil Smith Rowe some more minutes. These are guys that maybe coming back from injury can help in the long run, but not able to, and not able to even get the 3 points. Very very frustrating.
And one thing I kind of want to get at, you mentioned how it was similar, and you mentioned how you were actually a little bit more disappointed with this one than with Arsenal, and I can understand that because I think versus Arsenal, basically I thought versus Liverpool, Arsenal I thought were outplayed. And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in this one, yeah, you missed the PK, so I don't necessarily think it's there's a pattern here. I do think they're different circumstances, so that's okay. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. You
the
don't want any bad patterns
the
developing,
schedule
but.
The schedule, though, like you mentioned, is not necessarily friendly. We mentioned how Man City have a lot of games, but Arsenal I think have Man City, Chelsea, and I think Newcastle almost all in a row.
And
Um,
Brighton, yeah,
and we don't know when you're gonna. It's Brighton a little bit later, I think, but
yeah.
I think.
Brighton's right after Newcastle, so it's a
Oh, there we
four
go. You're
four
right.
it's 4 games in a row that's is quite the gauntlet. I
I
mean,
think,
obviously, Chelsea isn't what they used to be, but still, they have talent.
and one thing to say is yeah, you're gonna eventually you're going to absolutely need Saliba back. Now, I think
Yeah,
one thing that's funny
definitely.
is we've already seen Holding versus Holland.
Oh, that's
It
right.
happened in the FA game, and Holding held his own. Holland did not necessarily have the best FA game. Arsenal lost to Man City in that game because of like Ake scoring a goal.
That's right, yeah.
And what's kind of funny is at the Etihad, earlier in the year, I thought Arsenal outplayed City. Tommy also had a mistake. They basically gave a goal for Kevin De Bruyne to get the early one, and then Arsenal basically kind of gave 2 goals away from like Gabriel like, being really poor on the ball. And you didn't have Party that day.
That's right.
You had Jorginho. So
Yep, yep.
I do think they're. I'm actually a little bit more upbeat to be honest. I don't want to jinx anything, Rex. So you can disagree and
Knock on some wood, yeah.
maybe save it there. But I really think if I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm a little bit more upbeat about playing Man City, especially because it's coming to the Emirates, than I am about that Brighton game, and frankly,
Hmm,
away to
hmm.
Newcastle. Even
Yeah.
though we
Away
just
to
saw
Newcastle.
Newcastle being awful, but they're going to be upset about that. And Newcastle going to press you like crazy. If you're going to struggle versus West Ham's press, you're going to need Sabliba back
For sure.
very very soon.
Against Isak or Callum Wilson, yeah.
And
And that
you're gonna need
crowd
Zinchenko.
at St.
You're gonna
James
need Zinchenko back because
and Zinchenko.
I think that was another take
Yeah,
I had is like, man, have I've been praising Party for a lot of this and because Party's been good, defensively. He's done, he's done the holding job, but he's had some of the possession and some of the buildup kind of taken off him. That's been Zinchenko's role. And man,
yeah.
do you see what he has to offer and what's missed when he's not able to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he plays that role very. It's very different than most fullbacks. He's more of kind of like a holding midfielder with his passing, and that is really helpful. And we saw it in the beginning of the year too. So yeah, not having him, Tierney's a good backup. He really is, but he's just different from Zinchenko. He's more of a traditional fullback. He's not as good passing as Zinchenko
And
is. It kind of can
he's
stand with
having to
him.
learn an entirely different, like, basically game plan or, like, system, essentially, which can be a little
Yeah,
different to him. I think, when Party gets the ball pitched off him, by Declan Rice, you see Tierney basically, on the sideline where a fullback is supposed to be, instead of being
mhm,
basically right next to Party, where I think maybe, Zinchenko would have been. It was also
yeah,
interesting how, Bowen basically took the game over a little bit in the second half too. That forced Tierney to kind of defend a little bit more out wide because you can't have Gabriel really leave holding and allow people to run at him by himself. Because that's
yeah.
where I think that's where I think you missing Saliba really does hurt. Gabriel has to stay closer
Absolutely.
to holding to help him out as well. But
Mhm.
and next up is
Yeah.
lowly Southampton. But one thing that's worth saying is Southampton away to Southampton. It was a away game and it was with Alison Hoodle. Arsenal dropped points that game.
Mhm.
I think it was
Yeah, that's
1-1.
true.
So, that one's
Yep.
not necessarily, in the books yet, even though Southampton when do we get to them? We didn't mention them last week when we talked about, penciling in teams. We maybe should have. They did not necessarily look great versus Crystal Palace. Um,
Yeah.
one thing I wanna address with you, though, because Jeremy brought this point, up to me, and, it's something that, I've kind of been, o overlooking, and maybe I shouldn't. This is gonna sound like an excuse, but I don't think it should be. This Arsenal team is on the verge of being a 91, 92 point team, and the only reason they have to sweat this out is they're going against a club that has basically spent the last decade financial doping. Um, and
Yeah.
it is what it is. And they've been able to, basically what they've done is they've like created sponsorship income, so they've been able to spend, they've been able to look. We've been able to make certain incomes where we're not necessarily in the hole. Um,
Mhm.
and again, that does sound like an excuse, but this is a machine that Arsenal is going against, and this is the reason why they have to fight and claw, to now where 90 points isn't going to be enough. So
Yeah.
It is worth saying. I mean, it sounds like sour grapes,
Yeah.
but,
Well,
if
it's
you do actually
fact.
end up losing to, like, a point or 2, maybe Arsenal fans can kind of join Liverpool fans and kind of, get some change, going, 'cause I went through this,
Yeah.
like, basically 2 years in a row.
Well, uh-huh, and it just seems like nothing's gonna happen with City and, all this, all the spending they're doing. It just seems like nothing's really gonna happen. I mean, we had the story a couple months ago too, about it again cropping up, and,
Right,
I don't
yeah.
know, the story kind of faded away, nothing happened. Financial fair play too, they got in trouble, nothing really happened there. So, I don't know, it's good to mention,
They got in
but
trouble with
I don't
Europe.
know.
It wasn't just like
Yeah. Yeah, Europe,
they're in
yeah.
trouble now with, like, the actual, like, FA or, like, the English, commission.
FA,
They
yeah.
were in trouble with Europe.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and Europe
Yeah, and
nothing nothing
both
happened.
were saying they City weren't really cooperating with their investigations and things like that. So it's worth mentioning, but I don't. Unfortunately, I don't think things are going to change. And other teams are going to have to spend more money to close that gap.
Yeah, especially once they've added, you win the league 4 out of 5, and then you add a guy that can score, honestly, a goal a game if he's healthy.
Yeah.
That is just wild. To focus on West Ham. This is a this is a goofy team. And Newcastle thumped them 5-1, but it was only 2-1 at halftime, and then West Ham decided to basically gift away 2 goals. But they can be compact and really hard to break down, to be honest. And like, Moyes just has a way of getting his side to show up when they absolutely need to.
Yeah.
So I mean,
When it
there's
seems like Moyes is going to get fired if they lose,
it
they win. Yeah,
it
it's
can be
crazy.
boring. It's not the sexiest football. But a way to stay in the league is to be just be middle of the pack defensively. They're not spectacular, but they've conceded 41 goals. Southampton has conceded 53, Leicester 55, Forest 56, Bournemouth 59, and Leeds 60. And the goal differential
Lead
is minus
60.
12. A number of those teams are basically either in minus 20 or even closer to minus 30 goal differential.
Mhm.
So West Ham, even though points wise they're in the muck with all these other teams, and when you look, sometimes they really do have absolute stinkers.
Yeah.
It seems that this says they should have enough. And another thing I want to get
Yeah.
at is this seemed crazy to me. Is the announcer said that Declan Rice and Jared Bowen were 2 of the 3 players that had played on Thursday. And I don't understand why they're taking Conference League knockout football seriously, when they are at least kind of still in this. Now that I don't want to necessarily take knock down Conference League. I do like the idea of having another way to get more teams into Europe and get that experience out there. But when you're fighting relegation, they should not be taking this as seriously as
Yeah.
apparently they are. Because as we saw with
Yeah.
Man
Good
United,
point.
an injury to Declan Rice or Bowen, I would have to change my perspective on what I just said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely get it, and I agree with you. If they were, mid pack, maybe if they were where like Fulham or Chelsea are, they're safe from relegation. Then yeah, you can go for it. But if you get relegated, but win Europa Conference League, like that's not going to do anything. You're going to lose money still just from getting out of the Premier League. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but based on form in the Premier League, they've only lost 1 out of the last 5. So on form alone, it looks like they're trending to avoid relegation. But I mean, everything's so close. They're 4 points out, so there's a lot to play for still. But yeah, I think Moyes is going to get this one done. They do have the players to do so. I mean, you saw Bones' quality in this Arsenal game. He just hasn't had the year yet last year. Antonio's kind of the same. He was great last year. Hasn't really done much this year. That's part of why they've only scored 29 goals this year. It's pretty bad. But yeah, I mean, I think they can stay up. Form alone is suggesting that they'll do just enough to stay.
You mentioned Antonio, and one thing that's kind of funny, you mentioned how if Arsenal if Arsenal necessarily don't do don't do it. You mentioned like the Saka memory. I'm gonna bring up if they do, you can think back to the Kanate deciding to chest a pass in, and Antonio
Mm,
missing point blank to basically win the game 3-2 because that happened I think in like the 85th minute when there
that's
was a cross
right.
sent in and just for some reason, some way, that didn't go in. The point for the last 2 games, if you're an Arsenal fan, I understand, feeling down about it, and it's because of who you're going to against a machine, not really a club. But there is maybe some reason to kind of still kind of look at the optimistic side, and you have City coming to your ground. You still control it. You can even draw that game.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
All right,
Lot to play for still for sure.
we'll move on to Spurs and Bournemouth. This game was awesome. I was watching. I was watching the Brighton game, and then I immediately kind of switched over after basically the Incensio goal. I was glad I did that because the final 20 minutes of this was fantastic. Spurs who actually go on to lose 3-2, and they had actually come back a little bit. I mean, they get the first goal with Son, but then Vena, who apparently is a loanee from Roma. I entirely forgot about this, and he's it's his first start, and he gets his first start with a goal, and apparently maybe it was even he had some muscle issues because he had to get subbed off, to start the second half. The Solanke's able to get the second goal, so they go up to 1, and then I thought this was kind of unfortunate. Dan Juma comes on and gets a goal on his own team, old team,
That's right.
to make
Yeah.
it 2-2. And then right after, it looked like Richarlison had basically done what Arsenal had done to Bournemouth, where Richarlison had basically gotten his first goal as a Spurs player. He has a free header, and it just kind of goes wide. Wadatara is able to basically create a little space for himself with a nice little feint to get past I think it was Hoiberg, and makes it 3-2, winning the game in the 93rd minute. And man, how insane a few inches changes the storyline. Because it really did
Absolutely.
feel like Bournemouth were about to go through this not again kind of phase. And what's funny is, well, I think Bournemouth were beating Spurs 2-0 earlier in the season, and the Spurs actually came back to win 3-2 in that game as well. And instead, Bournemouth have a little magic going, and it was crazy because I don't know what I would be able to say if that Richarlison goal had gone in, because again, it would have been another really poor job defending set pieces. The only reason I think that Bournemouth are actually in this spot is because they've been poor at defending set pieces.
Mhm.
Because on
Yeah,
form, they look like a team that belongs.
they do. They really do. But they got some good players. I mean, Guitarra too has paid off pretty much immediately as he set foot in Bournemouth. I mean, they got him in January, and he's had some assists, starting to score now. I mean, he got the game winner here, so he's worth the 3 points alone there. But yeah, some people starting to step up. Billing's been playing well. Tavernier was playing well before he got hurt, but he's back now too. They have a solid keeper from Barca and Neto. So
He's been good
I
though,
don't know. Yeah,
because
he has been. He's
when they
been
were
really good.
struggling, I think it was they said Travers. The second guy was
Yeah,
really
Travers.
really poor.
Travers. Yeah.
Travers was one that played versus Liverpool when they had that 9-0. So
Oh gosh. Yeah. Well, two wins in a row too. So they're starting to pick up some steam. I mean, there's what are they? They're 6 points clear. But their goal differential isn't that good. So if they do go on a losing streak, they could very well be sucked back in to
they're
the
one of
relegation
those.
fight.
They're one
But
of those in like the
yeah, they're one of the
minus 30. They're close to
minus
Forest.
20.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're close. Oh, yeah, only four from Forest. So, and it's worse than Everton, Leeds, West Ham, who are just right below them. So, still, it's still going to be a nervy. It's going to be a tight finish to the bottom three for sure. The relegation bottom three.
And I want to touch a little bit on how they got their goals, because it was interesting how you think of a team like Bournemouth. Basically you look at how, because it's away to Spurs. You would have understood, and they started with a back three. They basically try to match up. Back three versus basically a system that they don't always play. They try to match up Spurs in the same formation. You would have understood them sitting back and actually trying to be defensive, because it's a way to Spurs ground. You saw what Leicester do that. You saw West Ham actually start off doing that, and instead, no, they, even though they're playing a back three, they actually they had their wing backs high, and they actually pressed Spurs high up, and that's what actually leads to the mistake here. Poro plays a really Poro, I guess, plays gets the ball kind of pitched off him essentially. And then they're able to kind of attack that way. There's a really good through ball by Solanke here, but what I want to get at is this comes from like a Spurs free kick, and Eric Dyer is passive and passes it to Romero. Romero is passive, passes it back to Eric Dyer, and then Eric Dyer passes it to Davinson Sanchez. This is important too because Davinson Sanchez has only just come on because Langley has just had an injury, and that actually ended up really showing up for them because Langley actually has a nice ball over the top that basically leads to the first Spurs goal. And so, you had to switch Romero out, and you brought in Davinson Sanchez in. And Davinson Sanchez has a really poor first touch. It gets the ball stuck under his feet, and he basically plays a pass to Porro that basically, sends him into just a danger zone. And then Porro's just really poor with it. But
Yeah.
this has been a theme here, where it looks like teams are not really threatened by Spurs when they have the ball at their feet with their back line, and it feels like, hey, they can go actually press them and press them into trouble. I remember saying the same thing in that Everton game when Everton had 10 men.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But I don't know. I think they're gonna be okay based on form. I mean, 3 wins out of last 5, so I
Mhm.
mean that looks good enough to get them out. I don't know, Ben. We'll see. Everything's so tight, and like you said earlier, it changes. Game week to game week. So who knows what will happen next week when we're talking about this? It could be different. I don't know.
Well, it could, but I mean, weirdly, they do think this is a little bit more. Everyone wants to, get up. I usually like talking about the team that does win the game. I do think this is maybe a more of a story about Spurs, because what they've done has been weird. It's not necessarily, you can't blame this on the caretaker, but I find it weird how you get rid of Conte, but you keep basically his second guy in charge, and what's happened is he's playing the same kind of system that Conte was playing. But really, you can do all you want with systems. You can play more attacking football. The back line is really really the issue because that gets
Yeah,
to the second goal. I mean, the second goal comes from Bournemouth actually playing the ball from the back. It's a really nice pass over the top by Neto, and then they're able to kind of advance the ball forward. And they're able to isolate, Davinson Sanchez, and it's poor defending by Sanchez because I think he ends up kind of I think Tavernier is kind of running at him, and Sanchez basically kind of pokes the ball to Solanke's feet, and Solanke's able to put it away. It's a similar finish actually to the first goal. But Eric Dyer is really poor here too because he starts off like 20 yards behind Sanchez. You think of like a team's usually kind of supposed to be kind of equal with each other, and that kind of allows that basically allows any kind of ball over the top to get you into trouble, and it does.
absolutely.
And
I mean, you can't play that high line with
and
slow defenders and
yeah.
expect to hold up against a deep ball over the top.
And we did see some changes. We saw Danjuma come on. We saw Richarlison come on, and it actually helped them. They ended up like it's a really good goal by Danjuma, and even before this, it looked like Richarlison had scored. And what's crazy? It did feel like if there was going to be a team that would win it, it was going to be Spurs. And what's kind of crazy is uh, so I don't understand what Spurs were actually doing in that final 5 minutes. You look at who the players were on the field, and I think Perisic was maybe actually asked to be the wing back.
Yeah,
Harry Kane was almost playing in midfield, kind of next to Hoiberg, because you had Richarlison and Danjuma ahead of him, and you still have Kulishevsky on. And I don't know if Kulishevsky was maybe asked to either be a wing back or kind of the fullback. But you saw this kind of show up for that third goal for Bournemouth. They had no one on that left side, and so what happens is Solanke abuses Pedro Porro to kind of win a loose ball, and then he runs past Christian Camara. Christian Camara overcommits, and then he finds Ouattara to his left. And what's weird is there isn't a fullback or a defender here. So Hoiberg, who I assume is a defensive midfielder, he actually does a good job to run back and kind of defend. But he's running back so fast that all it takes is just kind of a cheek cut by Ouattara. Hoiberg can't stop himself, and so he goes
yeah.
past him, and then it's a really good finish.
Oh, it was an amazing finish too. I really like him, Ben. You're the one that first turned me on to Vitara, but he's awesome. He's fun to watch.
He
Good
is fun to
signing.
watch, and
Hmm.
he's crazy young. I think it's only his first goal, but it seems like to
Yeah,
have that composure for being that young. Everyone would have understood him getting the ball and trying to take a shot basically with his left foot to try to beat Lloris that way, which would have been a lot harder to do. And once he's able to kind of cut inside and get it onto his right foot, he's basically able to pass it in, and
Yeah.
that's basically what he does. It is a very, very calm and composed, finish, and,
Yeah.
to touch on Spurs again, I feel like they got away with one last week with Brighton. And it almost feels like they didn't kind of take that notice. You can only ride your luck so far. And yeah, again, it did feel like if there was a team that was going to win it late, it was maybe going to be Spurs. So that kind of maybe surprised them too. And what's funny is if you're Bournemouth, man, are you playing with fire when you on the set pieces because they gave Spurs like 8 corner kicks and it seemed like they were dangerous on every single corner kick. And I think the Danjuma goal even comes from not being able to defend, a long throw in into the box. So if they do stay up, I think they're going to have to go into the transfer market and fix some of that back line. Do not do the mistake that Leeds did last year because Leeds had the warning last year and they didn't mess with that back line. They brought on some more attackers. Bournemouth, I think, are fine with the attackers, and what's weird is I think they're fine in midfield. I look at Oliver Skip and Hoiberg. If I'm a Spurs fan, now Betancourt's missing. But I look at Lerma and I look at what Jack Rothwell are what they offer on the ball, and if I'm a Spurs fan, I'm like I would take that over what we have, which is kind of unique. So
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Lots of questions for him, but they definitely need Betancourt back. They're different with him on the
like
team for sure.
that's what's is absolutely crushing because they lost him in like January and it was an ACL. They're not going to have him to start the good part of the next season.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, 24 shots in 8. Bournemouth were 9 shots, but they were able to get 6 on target. And they 8 corner kicks to 1 in Tottenham's favor as well. The interesting thing here is, Spurs did have majority of the ball, but Bournemouth did have 43% of it. And Bournemouth, when they did have the ball, they actually looked pretty good with it.
Yeah.
Again, this is the when you look at the defensive statistics, and you said the goal differential, you would think there's no way that with a caretaker manager as well, they'd be able to do this, and
Yeah.
they've been fantastic under Gary O'Neill.
Yeah, I think O'Neill's done a really good job. I mean, it could be huge to be able to come in when your team really isn't doing that well and keep them in the Premier League. Like even if he gets fired next season, let's say he stays on, because he gets them, in the Premier League, gets them to stay in there. I mean, even if he gets fired later on, there could be like if Everton stays up next year, Everton could be like, hey, we need someone that knows how to come in
That's
and save
interesting.
a team from the relegation zone. Because I mean, we kind of see it with Deitch now. Even, he saved Burnley from getting relegated so many times. Like,
No,
club like Everton snapped them up. It could be the same situation, maybe. Just which is crazy. Just from doing a good job for half a season can in the Premier League, get you another job when you're inevitably fired,
well,
from your current Premier League
he
one.
seems
So
to have the magic touch as well.
he
Because
does.
versus Fulham, he made halftime changes, and basically, he brought on Tavernier and Christie that day, and they led both those teams led to the 2 goals to help them win 2-1 over Fulham. And in here, he subs on Watatar basically on in the key moment, and Watatar ends up winning it for them.
Yeah,
So he's making good manager decisions as well. But to go to a side that is trying for Champions League, and you're playing a back three, and they weren't negative. I mean, they still pressed high, and they pressed with wingbacks, playing high up and involved in their attack. And they could have sat deep, and you would have understood them sitting deep, and they didn't do that.
mhm.
I think that's commendable. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Especially, I mean, because it looks like in the 88th minute when Dan Juma scores, it looks like it's all it's just going to be a point for Bournemouth, and I mean, only 7 minutes later, scores. So it just shows really good mental resolve too, to concede and be like, oh, now we're gonna get only a point. But they were like, no, we're just gonna keep trying. We're gonna try to get the win. They could have very easily hung their heads and just settled for the point, but instead they were like, no, let's get the win. And the 3 points in the end is so much bigger than just a point, especially against Tottenham.
and when we did our little kind of recap show, I want to say like 2 months ago, I had basically a leading score for each team, and it was Kiefer
Mhm.
Moore, for them. And we
Yeah,
haven't really seen him at all, but, he's been playing Solanke instead, and he's been rewarded with that. I mean, Solanke actually has been really good for them the last, 2 or 3 2 2 months as well.
Yeah,
he has a
filling as well.
big finish here for the second goal, and just he actually looks like he can be a guy that you can link up, you can ask to link up for being his size. He has good pace to him as well. He's been a good addition for them. So
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
that
Yeah,
is good to see. Solanke was at Liverpool, and they ended up they sold him a few years back. I think Solanke actually was one of those young England 21 guys that was actually playing for the England 21, and maybe his career has kind of taken a little career I want to say backwards, just a different trajectory. So it's good to see him
yeah.
kind of showing up again and showing up in a big stage. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and
battling back from, just not having the career maybe he envisioned at a young age, but still really good player, and maybe he still has that chance to be a top-notch player. We'll see. I mean, he's still scoring goals for Bournemouth. He's starting to heat up, so anything can happen. A little resurrection of the career right at the time when Bournemouth need him most is important.
One last thing to say about Spurs is I think it's weird. They're trying to get Champions League football, and I think I said it last year or last week. The carry job that Harry Kane has been able to do has been insane. Because this to me looks like a team that is closer to being in 10th. Because
Mm,
they don't feel like they have an idea on how to press and how to win the ball back. I don't feel like they have an idea of how to actually play through teams. When they get the ball, it's get the ball out wide as quick as possible. Maybe get something like Perisic to be able to get a cross in, or maybe get like Son or Kulishevsky to do something amazing 1v1. Maybe you have to have Kane drop back and basically be the playmaker, and he's your best goal scorer. We did see them give it a the Saletti kind of threw it all in the bag in the second half. So he brought on Danjuma, Richarlison. You had Kulishevsky and Son still out there, and it was FIFA football. The final
mm.
5 minutes, and it did give them a goal back, and they were kind of threatening towards the end, but it was almost too much of it.
Yeah.
But it's just weird. I understand that things weren't necessarily going well with Conte, but it honestly seems a team that maybe the players are kind of surprised by that move as well, and they don't necessarily seem a team that understands what they're necessarily supposed to do, other than get
Yeah.
the ball to Kane and pray he scores.
Yeah, no, no, I feel the same way. Yeah. If Son or Kulusevski, just anyone to kind of help, you know, carry a bit of the load from Kane, especially if teams are just going to be like, we just need to shut down Kane and we'll be fine. It's important to have like one or two other guys to share the load, so just one person can't be shut out and your whole offense is shut out. So yeah, it's he's done a great job, but it's important that other people step up and kind of take the pressure off of him at times.
And as I started off with the show, it's not fun to do a weekly show where narratives can change. They have a monster game at away to Newcastle, I think, next week. And so, if they can find a way to kind of just win that one, they flip the script here again. The only way I can necessarily see that is I think Richarlison needs to play for them. Now he hasn't scored for them, but I think when he does play, he gives them a spark. And what he also does is he gives them kind of a run forward where it forces defenses to kind of think a little bit. And as we saw with we'll get to their game next. We saw their back line really struggle with pace with Ollie Watkins. So
Oh yeah.
you're gonna need to try a little something different. But
Yeah,
other than
absolutely.
that, and maybe just kind of pray that Newcastle have a really bad day finishing because the back line is rough, and you can I don't necessarily know what they can do to fix that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know either. Who knows? But yeah, at least try something different, see what happens, right? Who knows?
I'll be rooting for a very we'll say dramaless, maybe 1-1 or maybe 0-0. Because if both teams kind of get just 1 point, that'll be good. At least from my perspective, or maybe actually at this point, no, I don't need Spurs to catch up to Newcastle. I don't need Newcastle to get more points. Liverpool are kind of in a bad situation. But they're
Yeah.
also in a bad situation because of this other team. And we'll get to Aston Villa and Newcastle. And they go on to win 3-0. This did kind of come a little bit surprising because I said last week I thought Ollie Watkins was doing a bit of a carry job. I didn't really think that Aston Villa were necessarily playing that well in a lot of these games. And maybe that's not necessarily the wrong take because Ollie Watkins is carrying them. But it doesn't matter because he's carrying them to win after win after win. And for the first part, they looked really good as a team, I thought, which we'll get to. But the first goal comes from Jacob Ramsey. Ollie Watkins wins the ball in the air and heads it down to him. Ramsey finishes, and then Watkins gets the other two. Yeah, the match recap of just Villa was shot out of a cannon. From the first minute on, like 30 seconds on, Ollie Watkins was able to get behind Newcastle's back line and he forced a pretty good save. 40 seconds in, and it felt like they just kind of played like that the rest of the way.
Absolutely. They were great to watch, and they've been great to watch. I mean, I really thought that this game would be kind of a shootout. I thought, yeah, maybe Villa might score two or three, but I thought Newcastle would score three or four if that happened. So the really important thing is Villa getting clean sheets, and the defense is starting to get better. I mean, we kind of knew that they could score goals, even if they weren't scoring. We knew that they had the capacity to. But now that the defense is starting to get some clean sheets, it's starting to look pretty good. They've given up 40 goals, which is kind of high for where they're at.
Yep.
But
Similar
they're starting to get better.
to West Ham.
Yeah, definitely. But they're starting to get better, and the goals are coming too. So it's a good combo for them. And like we said earlier, this team could be dangerous in Europa. We don't think they have enough probably to make Champions League at this point. I think they're still kind of far out of it. Well, they're not far out of it. They're 6 points back with an extra game played on Newcastle. So
Hmm.
it would be tough for them to get that spot. But if they keep playing like this, they're going to put a lot of pressure on Newcastle and Tottenham, breathing down their neck for that fourth spot. It would be crazy if they got into Champions League. But it looks like European leagues are a lock, and with Emery's pedigree in the Europa League, especially with Villarreal, it could be a fun season for this year. Like we mentioned in previous episodes, they would have to really buy some more players, get some more depth because you're going to be adding that competition. But
100,
it could be
100%.
fun.
Because what basically Emery's doing is he's making Ollie Watkins do all of the running by himself, and he's basically he's got the supporting cast kind of behind him, and what they're doing is they're looking for him. So he's making the run, and they're also asking him, "Hey, you once you get the ball, you kind of need to go at it alone. You need to be a little bit by yourself sometimes because Emi Buendia isn't necessarily going to. Emi Buendia was kind of played as the second striker in this game. He's not going to be able to make those runs with Watkins.
Right.
But it's working because what that does is that's allowing them to be really compact in the midfield, and they're able to kind of win the ball back, and they've got the quality to actually look up and play the right passes to him. And one thing that's kind of crazy to me is for some reason Newcastle didn't recognize, hey, we can't necessarily play a high line here. Because it seemed, once you're able to get Trippier maybe out of position a little bit, Fabian Schär and Botman were not able to hang with Watkins all game. This could have been, it ended up 3-0. It could have been a lot worse. And
Yeah, it could have been good call.
and it was just, it was, to be fair, it wasn't necessarily, a Newcastle side that we've seen. Anthony Gordon started over Sean Longstaff, and we'll maybe get to that later on. That ended up not, maybe Sean Longstaff needed some rest, but you actually saw a little bit what he's added to this team. A little, kind of under the radar a little bit, but he does so much off the ball work that I mean, Newcastle were beaten in midfield in a way I haven't seen them all season. To be honest, I mean, this was a thumping.
Yeah, it really was. We haven't seen Newcastle play this poor, especially defensively, like you mentioned. So yeah, there's some concern there, but I mean, before this game, Newcastle was on fire, hadn't lost in the last four in the league. So maybe it's, I mean, if you're Eddie Howe, Newcastle fan, hopefully it's just a blip. And I think it will be. They're really good, and we were just talking up last week how good Isak
We were,
and
yeah.
Tom Wilson have been, and both were kind of absent in this game. But I don't expect them to be, absent against Tottenham. I just don't. I think shutting them down for one game is hard enough. I think they'll kind of come back with a vengeance in this Tottenham game, and I'm looking at this one as a possible shootout now. I mean, Villa and Newcastle I thought was going to be one too. So maybe that's a jinx that it won't be, but on paper at least, it looks like it's going to be a good game, and obviously a lot at stake, possibly that fourth spot in the Champions League between these two. So that's going to be a fun game Sunday.
Harry Kane going to do a little tryout for maybe a club that he could possibly be playing at in the future. I don't
Ooh,
necessarily know if that will happen. But I've always
can
kind
you
of,
imagine that? Isak, Calm Wilson, and Harry Kane.
because
They probably have
Newcastle,
to get rid of Wilson, I guess.
If Newcastle get Champions League, there's going to be a lot of speculation if Harry Kane moves. Where's he going to go? I don't think he can go to City anymore.
Yeah.
And if the idea is Newcastle or Man United, I think Newcastle would be a better long term project. But we'll get to that. We'll get to there later. I mean, Victor Osimhen, I think, is going to be in some of these teams' minds as well.
Yeah. Oh,
Um, but
absolutely.
yeah, we'll get when we get to we'll talk about Aston Villa, and obviously Ollie Watkins is a player of the game, but it was behind him that really did impress me. I mean, Dendonka got his first start in a while. They're missing Kamara. Dendonka and Douglas Luiz were really good at kind of annoying Bruno. They were really good at also getting some turnovers and. Yeah, really good on the ball. They played some really good stuff. It wasn't just going long to Watkins. They were actually and Imi Buendia was kind of helping out with that, and
Mhm.
they were able to kind of keep stuff on the ground and play quickly to feet. And once they got it, from the middle third to the final third, they were dangerous as well. This was impressive. Also, Alex Moreno has come in as a left back. I thought he got the better of Trippier in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good left back, and the defense starting to look pretty good. With Konsa and Mings pretty solid there, and obviously Martinez the keeper is great. So yeah, they're playing really well, and they're a fun team to watch. We really would like to see them in Europa League or Champions League just to see how they could do.
And what's again, I kind of I fall into the problem of kind of doing this, but I did kind of compare the two teams, and basically the main thing that I saw was Newcastle don't have someone like Emi Buendia, where sometimes
Mhm.
Newcastle can kind of be when their midfielders get the ball. Other than like Bruno Guimaraes, I don't really see someone that can be clever on the ball and kind of play a pass. I can see a lot of runners. I can see guys that can kind of make a run into the box and be
Mhm.
maybe a target, but I don't really. Other than Trippier, Trippier is really good at that final pass, and maybe Bruno is as well. But Bruno is being asked to kind of be the holder, be the defensive guy, and maybe that's a reason why you miss Longstaff. Sometimes when they have the ball, Longstaff will kind of be kind of the makeshift guy just in case, and Bruno can go forward. So maybe one thing that I think one thing they should think about is in the long term, do you want Bruno Guimaraes to kind of be wasted as being your defensive midfielder, being your holder, or do you want to get someone like Declan Rice to come in and make him be a little bit more advanced? Because I think Declan Rice is also another player that's probably going to be on the market for some of these teams. And again, if Newcastle do get Champions League, they're going to have money to spend, and obviously they have owners to spend anyways.
Yeah,
So
open up a different class of players that they can get
really
because they'll be
would,
like, I,
yeah.
I want to play in the Champions League. Oh, well, we are. So yeah, curious. We'll see what happens. Ooh.
And so I mean, the stats was 16 shots and 6 on target for Aston Villa. Newcastle were only 8-2. Newcastle did have, or actually Villa did have a little bit more of the ball, and Villa had better passing numbers, and that's a kind of a thing too that I've kind of noticed. Newcastle, 283. That's basically been where they are. Maybe they sometimes get like 330, but I never really see them at 400, passing completed. And when you compare them to where they are in the table with these other teams, they're one of the worst. They never are close with them in the passing numbers. And again, that kind of goes to what I was saying a little bit before. It feels like if there is a weakness, a little bit, or maybe critique, or a way that they can improve is maybe a better way to put it is maybe
Mhm.
there. Now, you're missing, Longstaff isn't necessarily going to help you with the passing numbers, so it maybe makes Bruno a little bit more advanced. Almiron has been missing instead of Jacob Murphy. But again, that is more, the end product and scoring. I don't necessarily know if that necessarily helps you controlling the game. So even at their best strength, I do think that's still a weakness.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree, Ben. That's something that they would need to probably figure out in the summer, especially with. I mean, definitely they're going to at least go to Europa, but probably even Champions League. So yeah, that's something they definitely need to address in the summer. But it looks like they'll have the funds, like they usually do recently, to go ahead and get basically whoever they want to. And now you can also dangle the fact that they're in Champions League also. So it just yeah, it opens them up to even higher class of players that maybe wouldn't want to go to Newcastle before this year because they weren't in the Champions.
Yeah, I mean, if Everton go down, you can maybe go for Amadou Onana as well.
Gosh, yeah.
I mean, to keep the focus on Ollie Watkins, he's showing he can do it all, because he can make runs out wide. He can win the ball in the air, which we saw for their first goal. He can set teammates up, which we also saw for the first goal. He can also, beat defenders in tight spaces. He can make time runs into the box and he can put them away. And I don't want to necessarily get carried away here. But he scored. We mentioned it last week. He scored double digits now for 3 straight seasons. This isn't just a purple patch.
Yeah.
And it's not just a really hot 3 months post World Cup. And I'm going to get to another stat post World Cup. I don't know if you knew this as well. Since the World Cup, I guess, or since Boxing Day, goal scored. It's Holland with 14, and then it's Watkins with 12. 3 assists
Mhm.
added as well, and then it's Rashford and Kane both at 11.
Mhm.
Which I think
Wow.
that might surprise some people.
I think that would that they're that high up. Yeah, that Watkins is that high up, but it's really impressive too because he really didn't get off to a great start this year.
Right.
So to be able to like kind of turn things around mid-season is spectacular. It just shows good mental resolve.
I mean, the masterclass that Emery has done is just kind of shipped Danny Ings out the door, because that's kind of coincided with this new stretch of form. And he's like, "You're going to be my main guy," and the only thing I'll say to that
Yeah, maybe
is
that's what did it. Yeah,
Watkins is doing a lot of running and a lot of work right now by himself. I don't know if he can do this the rest of the way. Um,
right.
but that's the only negative I think I'll say. And another thing to maybe latch on with Villa is Jacob Ramsey did not look like this under Gerrard. So another thing that Emery's done is he's taken over a team that basically was 16th. I think they were only I think they weren't in relegation because of like goal scored or something like that. Um,
Wow.
so it's really other than Alex Moreno. I think Alex Moreno came on in like January. He's playing with the same players,
Yeah.
but it's just he's improved these players. One, he Gerrard was playing Coutinho when he maybe shouldn't have been. But Jacob Ramsey did not look like this. I thought of Jacob Ramsey as kind of like a runner,
Yeah.
someone that could press well, someone that can make some runs, maybe be a threat in the box. The passing that Jacob Ramsey was doing in this game, the balls over the top was perfect. as
Perfect.
as
And
my
yeah,
as my dad would used to say.
perfect.
So I thought that was I think that's worth highlighting as well. He's turned Jacob Ramsey has he's maybe it's some of both. Maybe it's just Jacob Ramsey kind of taking his craft a little better in training. But Jacob Ramsey looks a better player at least under Emery than Gerard.
Yeah, he does, and he's still young too. So I don't know. I think just the man management by Emery is just kind of been better than Gerrard. He's maybe settled down the player a little bit and given him
Yep.
some more confidence because he is a really young player, like you said. That's part of the reason why we kind of thought of him as just kind of a runner because he was a young, pacey player, but
Because he
you
was
know
right, because he
was
looked he
just
looked
too
good.
young.
He looked good under Gerrard. He was scoring like really good goals for them. I remember, but
Yeah,
I didn't see him as this kind of passer being someone that when someone's being pressing. Now he is a little older as well. I think he's still maybe 20, 21 ish
yeah,
years old.
21ish, probably. Yeah,
He looks really experienced, and Newcastle were trying to press him, and he wasn't just going long to Watkins. He was finding Douglas Luiz or Dendoncker or Amy Buendia as well.
yeah,
Really really good performance by him. Um,
yeah, yeah. I'm a fan.
and
We're both fans.
and then with Newcastle, a bit like with Spurs and Brighton, they did get the warning last week with Brentford. And I guess they didn't heed it. Now Hal
Mhm.
brought on Ishak and Callum Wilson. They kind of played them both together, and Brentford were Brentford kind of gave him a little warning as well. So we'll see if it was just kind of a blip or something else. And they do have Spurs
Yeah.
at St James Park next week. So
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think it'll be a good game for sure.
and then we'll move on to Man United and Nottingham Forest. Our buddy Alex was once he saw the lineup was just kind of cursing into the air.
Mm.
And once we kind of get to it, I'll understand it. But it didn't show up this game, though it almost did. Goals from Anthony and Diego Dallo. Dallo was playing as a left back. Usually he's the right back, and that's because no Malacia and no Luke Shaw. Man United have injuries everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
but really not. There's not a ton to get to this game. I'm going to actually focus a little bit more on what happened in Europa. But whatever drama that was going to come down into this game, I think it was more on whether Harry Maguire was going to decide to get sent off in the first 15 minutes or not. And once he
Yeah.
decided to actually allow Man United to play with 11 or with 12 men or 11 men for the rest of the game, That pretty much sold it because Nottingham Forest were bad. It was only 2-0. Navas kept this from being really ugly. Navas had a good game.
Yeah,
No one else did.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. He's been huge. And I mean, just to add more bad news to the injury front for Man United, Sabitzer in this one was
Yep.
going to start, and he pulled up injured in the pregame warmup. So Eriksson had to start for him, perhaps being rushed into more playing time than Ten Hag wanted at this stage of his comeback from his injury. But I mean, just more injury problems. It seems like they get someone back and it's someone else out. Losandro's out for the rest of the season. I think he broke his foot. Varane will be back soon, but he's going to miss some games. So they're gonna have to play with Lindelof and Maguire for a few more games. And I mean, getting a clean sheet here is really huge for their partnership. It's a big boost in morale as well. And yeah, Maguire did well to not pick up that second yellow because he literally got the yellow in
Got it
like
early.
the
And
third minute. I think.
for
I
like
think it was
something
literally the third
for
minute.
something crazy. I
Hmm.
what he did was not legal in three ways essentially because he tackles Awane from being able to run at him, and if Awane's able to get behind him, it's like it's on Maguire's side of the field, or it's on Forrest's side of the field as well. He's gonna have a chance to get a one on one on De Gea. So it was borderline orange. I don't necessarily
Yeah,
say it was
yeah,
red, but it was intentional, and he tackled him. And like you said, it was like 6 minutes into the game, and Forest were bad, and this is the reason why Forest were bad. They did not take advantage of that. They did not go, and they should have spent all of their attacking on that side. Now
yeah.
I know
Try to
Man
get that
United
second yellow.
has Wan-Bissaka to help out, but Wan-Bissaka was taking a role in the attack a little bit for them, Man United were getting frustrated by not getting that second goal, and they were kind of pushed up a little bit. There was a chance there, and yeah, I guess I said I didn't want to necessarily focus on too much on that game because what happened in Europa is really the main storylines here.
Mm.
Uh, you mentioned Ericsson. Ericsson came on, and I think that balance between Casemiro. It was good to see Casemiro back.
Yeah.
Casemiro helps stop some of that transition a little bit, where maybe Harry Maguire and Lindelof won't be asked to do too much because Casemiro can help out. That balance with Eriksen and Bruno is really, really good because Eriksen is a very good middle third player, and he can get the ball to Bruno, he can get the ball to playmakers, and Bruno is fantastic in the final third. Bruno can get kind of struggles is when he does Hollywood balls a little bit further back, or when he tries to maybe take players on and loses it. But when he's
Mm.
on, he's spectacular. I think he created like 6 chances in this game, and in all of Europe, he's created more chances than anyone. I think more than
Wow.
Kevin De Bruyne or yeah anyone in Spain. So
Dang.
you sometimes forget about that. I mean, Bruno can be
Yeah.
absolutely special. Just
Oh
sometimes
yeah. He can
sometimes
pile up goals and
sometimes
assists.
he's asked to do too much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but we have seen him get just a boatload of goals and assists. In a season. But yeah, it was also when Man U weren't as good, didn't have quite as many good players, so he kind of did have to put the team on his back. And now he doesn't necessarily have to all the time, which is nice. You can rest him some maybe.
And yeah, the reason why I want to touch on what happened for Sevilla is, and it was the first game missing Rashford. You mentioned Sabitzer. Sabitzer scored 2 goals, really early on. And
Mhm.
it was a fantastic, really good setup play by Martial. Martial has a nice touch in the build up for the first goal and has a great assist for the second one. And then Malacia has an own goal, and Man United just fell apart a little bit in the second half. But the main thing was you had injuries. Injuries to Rafael Varane and injuries to Lisandro Martinez. And
Mhm.
you mentioned how Martinez is going to miss the rest of the season. Could have been worse if it was Achilles. He could have missed a year. So a lot of next season as well. So to hear it's only kind
Yeah,
of a broken metatarsal bone, I don't know.
metatarsal. Yeah, it
I,
shouldn't be
I,
bad
I don't
at
know.
all.
I
But
know it's in the foot. He should be able to recover before the start of next season.
oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
and
if this
then
happened a few months ago, he would have been, fine for the, end of the season. He would have been back in time. So yeah, it shouldn't be too bad. He should be able to be ready to go in mid to end of July when training picks back up. So that's the good news at least.
no Garnacho as well as no Rashford. So
Yeah.
the injuries are kind of starting to creep up, and Europa has not been kind to either Man United or Arsenal. As a Liverpool fan,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mentioned
that's
it. I
true.
mentioned it a couple shows ago. I'd rather them finish ninth than fifth.
Mhm.
Give me Conference League football where no one take just play the kids. I don't wanna see, Tiago playing versus Genk or, I don't know, yeah, Sevilla. There we go. There we
Sweet.
go. I was trying to Karabag. One of
Oh, yeah, sure.
one of those teams. I was trying to be cheeky. I couldn't think of anything.
You're back.
Um, yeah, I just this game was there's not a ton to talk about other than what Ericsson and Bruno and Casemiro were able to offer. Bruno was special. It's worth kind of mentioning on that, and maybe the reason to kind of keep the focus on that is there was a lot of focus on the missing Rashford, missing these other guys, but getting Casemiro back from suspension is massive. Also getting Ericsson back, and you saw how good that midfield was. So maybe that midfield can kind of keep the ball a little bit more and limit the transition stuff.
Yeah.
You can maybe force Maguire and Lindelof to just kind of be kind of settled and just, hey, beat stuff in the air. We're not going to ask you to necessarily, have the ball at your feet and things like that. So maybe you can kind of take some of the responsibilities off that. I mean, Forest, to get to the stats, Forest had 6 shots, 0 on target. Man United had 22 and 8 on target. Forest, again, 174 passing with 64% accuracy. Forest were bad. They've been bad really the
Mhm.
whole season. Jeremy thinks that they can stay up because he trusts Cooper and he trusts the home atmosphere. I understand that
Mhm.
argument. I've heard a lot of people praise up Steve Cooper, but to me he looks each game week is different and the same. And what I mean by that is you know that he's going to try something new.
Mhm.
So he tries a new formation, different back line, different front three. We saw Brennan Johnson with Iwani, so it was last week. It was Brendan Johnson by himself, so he recognizes you kind of need him to be with someone. But Iwane, I thought was poor. He didn't get the ball
Mhm.
much, but when he did get it, I thought he was poor. I don't understand why. Kind of similar with Inacho. I don't understand why Emmanuel Dennis isn't getting more game time. And the only thing I can think of
Mhm.
is he's poor in training.
Yeah, yeah, behind the scenes stuff because we don't get to see what's going on. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think Forest are going to be relegated. And I think it's what you said. It's just too much rotation. It's never the same starting 11. They can't really gel when it's always like someone different is playing next to you, or that you're playing a different formation. And I mean, they haven't scored goals and they've conceded. They only have scored 24, which is as much as Southampton or Everton, and they've conceded 56,
And
which is
the
pretty
schedule, and the
bad.
schedule is really, really rough for them. I remember kind of looking at that. It's not a bunch of teams near them. It's more kind of teams in the upper 10.
Yikes. Yeah, it's Liverpool, Brighton, Brentford, Southampton, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Palace, a resurgent Palace. So
Maybe
yeah,
Palace
that's a tough
maybe Palace won't
tough
have anything to
schedule.
play for, at that point.
Maybe,
So,
yeah,
and maybe you
maybe.
can, you mentioned, not Brighton. You mentioned, someone else. You didn't one more.
Right, it's Liverpool, Brighton, Brentford, Southampton,
Southampton.
Chelsea,
Southampton would be
Arsenal,
the one they
Palace.
would have to win. Yeah.
Yeah, and Southampton at that. Well, they already do, but they might have their back against the wall still. And a team like that is always dangerous if they're really just fighting for survival.
All right, and we'll move on to Chelsea and Brighton. Brighton go on to win 2-1, but Chelsea got the first goal with Connor Gallagher, just kind of a deflected shot over Sanchez. Sanchez started because apparently Will still had some injury issues, and this game actually came at a cost too because Evan Ferguson started. Evan Ferguson looked really good, and then injured his ankle going for a header. Welbeck came on and actually got them a goal to tie it 1-1, and then after it looks like it's just going to be one of those days again for Brighton, 2 games in a row where just luck wasn't on their side. Incenso came on and had a worldie from
Hmm.
like 30 yards out. This was beautiful.
Oh yeah,
Kappa it misses, but I don't think a keeper's stopping this. This was nice.
yeah, it was an amazing goal, and I don't think a keeper saving that either. Pretty crazy, honestly.
But I mean, this was an absolute hammering, even though it was only 2-0. Kappa actually did have a couple good saves. To be fair to him, he was maybe Chelsea's best player. Um, But I mean, this is one thing that's interesting here is after Brighton also had an injury to Veltman, and so I actually watched this game live. And so one thing that was weird is or unique is he took Pascal Gross, who started off as kind of a holding midfielder, and moved him back to right back. And then he moved Alexi McAllister, who's been like their number 10 guy, moved him back to be with Casado to do a pivot. And he brought on this Asensio guy, like 19 years old, basically be their creative, like number 10 attacking midfielder. And man, did that work out because Pascal Gross has the cross. to Welbeck for the goal, and then Isetsko gets the all important second goal.
Yeah, yeah, it was crazy. Good comeback too, man. Great to be able to see them go down early and to just mentally, and they always do, just mentally, they're able to overcome it and somehow overcome the 1-0 deficit and turn it around and score two and win. And like you said, it's a couple guys going out and getting hurt, and you're doing it with like Enciso. So it shows a little bit more of Brighton's depth, at least I would say.
Yeah, another guy from Paraguay, it's South Africa, worth mentioning as well. It seems like they really like recruiting that area. Maybe other teams should look at that.
Yeah,
But
they really should. I mean, I think they could take a hint from Brighton.
I mean, because they also have, I think, Sarmiento, who is injured. Who
They
when
do.
he's played, he looks pretty good. I think he's Colombian national. Um, but I think it's funny because given what happened with Graham Potter, Brighton started the season with Potter. They were in fourth, and then Chelsea was like, "We're going to take him," and Potter ended up taking a couple of guys with him. I think he brought like a couple of scouting guys with him, a couple of
That's right.
assistants with him. They ended up actually stabbing him in the back, which is funny. This was maybe someone above kind of hexing at Chelsea for that because Brighton won the first game worth I think 4-1 versus Chelsea, and then they come around and kind of get one at Stamford Bridge. And it is it and also Chelsea took Mark Cucurella off
Mhm.
Brighton. There's a lot of
Yeah,
intrigue actually with these two teams, and Levy Colwell has been playing for Brighton, and he wasn't able to play because he's a Chelsea loanee.
that's right.
So there's a lot of stuff going on between these two clubs, and right now Brighton's enjoying a little bit more of it than Lampard.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of obviously now with hindsight, totally the wrong decision to for Potter to leave Brighton for greener pastures. It
It
wasn't really
is
the case.
it is unfortunate because like you mentioned how maybe someone can hire Gary O'Neill, and one thing that was in the back of my mind, seeing that Dean Smith was hired, seeing Southampton kind of go with this kind of caretaker is why has no one phoned Graham Potter? And the only thing I can think of is because people have just been like they've been scared by what happened at Chelsea. Chelsea is just a
Yeah,
mess. You're
yeah,
right.
they really are.
Graham Potter has gone from having everyone kind of praising him to really the shine getting off him for some reason. And I think that if I'm Leicester, I would have immediately hired him.
Mm,
Maybe it works out with Smith.
yeah,
It was just I just think Chelsea wasn't necessarily the right call. Spurs. If I'm Spurs in the summertime,
Bruce.
I'm thinking about Potter. Um,
Yeah, because it wasn't long ago that people were mentioning Potter for the England national team job. He could have been a candidate. So yeah, I mean, I would if I was Leicester, I'd absolutely for sure.
I mean, when you think of someone like Southgate, that's in charge now. There's no way Potter would be worse than that. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, you wouldn't think so.
I'd be in that camp. I mean, Lampard doesn't know what to do. He started to get different lineup. Basically played with made 6 changes. Started Mudrick. Mudrick actually looked pretty good. So there's some hope there. Sterling was striker, so they had absolutely no one to do any kind of cross into a box with. Sterling was when Sterling wasn't really offering much for hold up play. When Sterling was getting the ball, he was going wide for it. We saw Pulisic get a start, and Pulisic almost scored. But I mean, he got hooked early in the second half. The only thing I'll say is we saw Zakaria and Enzo kind of played as a pivot. That didn't necessarily work out either. But I mean, maybe it was just kind of Zakaria being asked to do a job he wasn't really used to. And we saw Reece James kind of rested for Chalobah. And we saw Reece James come on in the second half, and Matoma cooked both of them. So it didn't really matter that way as well. And with Brighton, I think the thing that's kind of crazy. I'm going to get to this stat. Um, Almost single handedly, Moise Caicedo ate his lunch versus Chelsea. He had 7 tackles, won. It's a good. It's normally It's a good game for people when they have 3 tackles. So
Mhm.
almost double that. 12 duels won. And he was a 92% accurate passer when being pressed. Bullied Chelsea's midfield. Estupian was good. He's making recoveries as well. It was funny to watch Estupian versus instead of they would have had Mark Cucurella if not for Chelsea. I think Brighton's
Yeah.
actually kind of gotten the better of that deal. And I'm gonna quote Thierry Henry from the other night with Matoma because he was cooking. Just absolutely did. Just the pace, the change of pace, the quick feet, the way he was just running and creating. Chelsea did not want to see him ever again. So
Yeah, he's so fun to watch too. I've really grown fond of this guy, and watching him play is really fun. I mean, we say it every week, but bravo to Brighton scouting to going to the J League and finding this hidden gem. And I pip him to do a lot more things, either with Brighton or with maybe a top four team in the Premier League.
God,
Eventually, he's that good.
if Man
I want to
City,
stay, but
maybe a good thing with Grealish actually having a pretty good second half of the season. They're going to get off trying to move off Grealish because him it because he's able to do this at a club like Brighton. Well, I shouldn't say that. A style like Brighton because Brighton are possession based as well. And he can play in a possession-based team. This isn't just counter ball. But one thing that's kind of
yeah.
unique is they almost create counter opportunities just by the way they're able to keep possession and able to kind of bait teams to come at you. There's an online slang term used to kind of describe either player traits or like teams, and it's pace, power, and like technique. I think Brighton basically check all three boxes, and it's if there is a weakness here, it's depth. But this 11 is Champions League ready right now. I don't think there are
Ooh.
4 teams in England with a better midfield, than Brighton with Alexi
Hmm.
McAllister, Pascal Gross, which is worth saying as well, or Casado. And out wide, I don't know if there are 4 teams in England with better wide players than Sully Marsh and Matoma. And I'm going to include Marsh in that as well because this is crazy to say. If you did a blind test and you gave up, Marsh's statistics, he would match a player in England that people have said is maybe, player of the season as well since the World Cup, or at least, as a wide player, and Saka. He's matching
Hmm.
Saka's stats.
Wow, that's eye opening for sure. And De Zerbi is a brilliant coach too. Make
Yeah,
no mistake about
I
that.
don't
He's
I don't
awesome.
I don't think Marsh has had more than 3. I think he had 3 goals last season. I don't think he's had more than 5 in a season. He looks an entirely different player, and
Yeah, that's
he's
true.
able to offer assists, and we saw in this game he was actually play inside, and that allowed Pascal Gross to go in and cross the ball in. Um, but I mean, just personally, just kind of say, I guess an opinion or whatnot. I just think it would be good in the game in general for this kind of inventive, aggressive, front-footed, risky, chance-taking, whatever football was rewarded. I want more teams to copy it. Now it's risky but it's so pleasing on the watch. It's not hoofball, or it's when they do go long, it's with a purpose.
Mhm.
What's funny, as I said last week, when you watch them play, you praise them for how they pass around teams, and build possession from the back. But you also praise them by how they're able to win the ball back. Their counter pressing is next to none. It's as good as anyone else in England.
Yeah,
So yeah, and
yeah.
then
Credit to De Zerbi.
and
He's a
then
great
with
coach.
with Chelsea, so I usually put down positives and negatives. I put down a positive here is it can't get worse. So there you go. It's got to get better going forward because this was as bad as it could have been. De Zerbi, Brighton beat Chelsea 4-1 earlier in the season at Brighton, and De Zerbi was actually gave a quote after the post game, even though they only won 2-0. He said they played much better than they did that first game. I think he was right.
Mm,
Chelsea. The only way this game wasn't a high number is Kepa had a couple good moments, and Brighton actually did have a couple poor finishing chances, but they were bad. And maybe the one positive you could say is Mudryk was maybe the most active that he's been since joining Chelsea. So
yeah,
there's something there
they
for
could
him.
use him.
They
Yeah,
really
they could
could.
use him to start showing for sure.
I mean, did I mention the stats? 26. Yeah, I didn't. The XG was point 0.5 for Chelsea, 2.94 for Brighton. Chelsea did have 8 shots and 2 on target. Brighton had 26 and 10 shots on target. 5 big
Wow.
chances and 5 missed. I
Ooh,
mean, the possession was
dang.
almost 70% in the first half at Chelsea's own ground. They ended up being like 57-43. Brighton 475 passing with 86% accuracy, which is kind of that's normal for them.
Yeah, yeah, it's starting to be normal for him. Yeah,
And let's see. One thing to maybe say about let's see. Right, I mentioned how I didn't necessarily understand the firing of Potter after seeing what Lampard's done the last couple of games. Yeah, I think that was actually an okay take. But
yeah,
another thing to kind of say is Chelsea and like Nottingham Forest are going to be really good examples to kind of refute any kind of a debate where all a team or owner needs to do is spend money to be successful in English football. Because we're looking that you need to have an idea behind it. You need to have like a football director that's overseeing player attributes. They can understand how a player is going to fit into a system. You need to have a style or system to how you're going to play. And it seems like Chelsea spent 650 million on just an idea on, hey, we'll just get whoever's on the market and we'll just try to get so much talent together, it'll work out. And it seems when both teams play, I think it's actually a really good comparison. When both teams play, it looks like they're just two teams playing without a plan or idea, and it seems like players don't really know, what to do with each other either.
Yeah. Yeah, they just weren't given too much time to
And
gel,
if it wasn't,
when they got him, so
they got off to a decent start under Tuchel. It wasn't great. If Chelsea didn't have that early, 12 points to start the season, you look at where they've been since maybe hiring Tuchel, they would be in a relegation spot. And I looked at this as well. At least I don't necessarily know in the top teams, but for the bottom 10, there are only two teams that actually haven't won a game in the last five. Yeah, there are a couple of draws. They haven't won a game in the last five, and it is Chelsea and I
Ooh,
think Nottingham Forest.
wow, interesting, huh.
So there is yeah. Oh, and yeah, we'll move on to Liverpool and Leeds, and I'm going to group these together because Alex or Jeremy basically said, there's a title race, there's a top four race, relegation race, and then a Liverpool and Chelsea race to see who can have the more disappointing season. So we'll move on to Liverpool and Leeds. This one ends somehow 6-1. Goals from Gakpo, Salah, Sinistera after a kind of a mistake by Kanate to kind of give Leeds a little life. And then, Liverpool actually really poured it on with Jota, Salah again. I have Jota again. Did Jota get two? And then,
Yeah,
yeah, Henderson had the assist. And then Darwin Núñez came on. And really, the only thing to maybe say here is, I mean, Liverpool did feast. This was Thanksgiving for them. But it was a weird game because until like the 30th minute, I mean, I was on Twitter kind of complaining a little bit. I didn't like what I was seeing. It's crazy enough. They ended up winning 6-1. I don't think before they ended up scoring a goal, and it was a fortuitous break. I thought, there's maybe a handball on Trent that wasn't called. Liverpool were going very side to side, and Leeds were just kind of sitting in a block, being annoying. Leeds were not really, trying themselves, but Liverpool really were not able to create any kind of danger moments for Meslier to kind of worry about until they got that first goal, and then things kind of opened up a little bit better. But this started off kind of
yeah,
weird, and when you look at the stats, Liverpool did not have many shots on goal. And I think the only shots on goal they had were the goals.
really? Yeah. Oh, wow, interesting, yeah, I'm seeing 7 shots on target, ABC Sports, but
Okay,
6
but but it was
oh,
but it
6 goals from 7 on
but
target
it was
is
only like
amazing.
12 or 13 shots total.
13 shots, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
and
shooting better than 50% on target.
so, I mean, there's not a ton to really talk about. I mean, Leeds are just I think you saw I think I even texted you guys. I understood why Palace scored 5, basically versus team last week. I think there's just Leeds back 5 or back line has been bad all year. It's a line that gave up, 80-ish goals last season, maybe 78, is something like that. I think they've got the worst defensive record this season. And so yeah, you fired Marsh to bring in someone more pragmatic, but the problem is you can play pragmatic all you want. You still got to defend. They can't defend.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't. No, not at all. And we've been talking about how bad their back four is years. So,
And
yeah, not a lot they can really do,
and
like in the summer, but
Leeds,
maybe in the
Leeds
championship.
Leeds deserve this by upsetting Liverpool and Liverpool fans because earlier in the year, people looked at Man City coming to Anfield and being like, "This is going to be the game that breaks Virgil van Dijk's like unbeaten record of like 4 years without like losing at Anfield." And they're able to beat Man City, and then they turn around and lose to Leeds. So damn on you. Uh, but the only thing to really talk about here is I guess I'll mention Curtis Jones. I mean, when Jota plays, Jota is chaos ball to me. Because he leads to goals, but he's not necessarily he doesn't have the best ball retention. He can lose it a lot. He's not necessarily the best passer, but he leads to goals. When he plays, I feel like he improves the front line. Gakpo is, he's very hit and miss as well. I understand he's trying to do something new, but it seems like he's still learning the position. And when you're playing kind of with a false nine, you need someone to help you with build up, trying to be creative. And what I was saying is he didn't really know what his role was. He was very stagnant and wasn't moving a whole lot. He does get the first goal, so that helps. But I think that was that was some of the reason why Liverpool were really struggling in that first half. You don't have he's not Gakpo isn't making the runs that Darwin Núñez would be making, and he's not running back in the midfield to offer himself as a number as Firmino would. So there's
Yeah,
still some getting used to there. But the main thing to
yeah,
talk about
definitely.
is Trent Alexander-Arnold was played in like a John Stones slash Zinchenko like role, and oh my God, was this good? He had like 150 touches, I think 120 passing, and his 90% accuracy, 2 assists, 12 for 17 long balls, 3 tackles as well. And so you're able to do this because Kanate actually has the pace to run out and at least close off danger. Um, in the middle, Trent can run, back, back behind him if that's needed. Trent was actually really good at pressing in this game as well. But another thing this does is this makes Henderson's job a lot easier. So Henderson, when he gets the ball, he's higher in the final third, and basically he's being asked to kind of just be out wide, and if you need to cross the ball, cross it. But he's taking the job off Henderson when it comes to build up and when it comes to him in the middle third. So that helps as well. And this is
Oh
only
yeah,
his first or second game kind of playing in this little pivot role, essentially, because he wasn't really a fullback. And man, did he look good.
yeah, he looked really good. I don't know if it's just because they were playing Leeds,
No,
but yeah, you
well,
don't think so?
I hope
I
not.
hope not.
I'd
Yeah, I
be.
hope not either, because I'd like to see him continue to play like
It's not
that.
like Leeds are like Leeds are the worst defensive team in the league. I know Klopp can't be like, well,
They are.
I have to play Trent here just because we won't be able to break down Leeds if not. Um, but
Yeah.
what's interesting is I mentioned last week I wanted to see maybe Gomez tried it right back and Trent in the midfield in like a 4-3-3.
Mhm.
3 And
Yeah.
the announcers were saying yesterday, well, maybe you don't need Bellingham, you can just play Trent in the midfield. And I've been saying that all season. After seeing this, maybe you can stick with him in kind of being the fullback, but in the Zinchenko like role because
Mm.
because it'll and obviously you'll have to still kind of deal with Henderson.
Yeah.
But getting him the ball kind of more, he's gonna because he's gonna see more of the ball in this position than he will as a midfielder. So and just he's so good with his decision making. The way he was spread in the pass, someone that has 150 touches and 120 passing, you would understand maybe a 75% pass accuracy or something else. 91,
Mhm.
he was good,
Yeah.
and this wasn't side to side stuff.
Wow.
He was looking to create.
Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant. He's brilliant on ball. It's weird because he's not like a fullback when you see him, passing well and getting up the field. Yeah, maybe that Zinchenko role would be perfect for him potentially. That would be interesting going forward.
It would. And again, you can experiment a little bit more because you have Kanate back. Kanate, if someone's needed, if they go down the wing, obviously that this is where replacing Henderson is still important because Henderson is technically supposed to be maybe a makeshift fullback when he can run back, but on transition times, Kanate can run out and do a job defensively on the sideline, which he
Absolutely.
did on Sinistera. And, he did have the mistake to make it a 2-1, so he didn't have the best game, but Konate is still a class, defender, and, Liverpool started the season without him. They started the season well, they've missed Diaz for almost all of this. They finally
Yeah.
had him back. We got to see him get a little run out. They're finally healthy. They have Diago back, so maybe they can make something interesting out of this next 8-game stretch. We'll have to see. I think it's come a little bit too late, but that is what it is. Another thing that's
Yeah.
interesting is Curtis Jones got a chance to play again. I didn't like him versus Arsenal. He has a fantastic assist for the third goal. This goal happens because of him. He won 11 duels as well. His counter pressing was much better in this game than it was versus Arsenal. Now again, Leeds are not Arsenal, so that maybe helped out as well. Leeds is so bad on the ball, but that's worth saying as well. And then a solid double. Salah's on 15 goals. He's probably going to get close to 20, maybe get 20 again for a season that people have said is a bad season, and he's only had 2 PKs this entire year.
Yeah.
Another thing is crazy too because I was trying to think when Salah missed that PK versus Arsenal. Well, he missed one versus Bournemouth, and then I was like, well, the last one he took, he missed versus Leicester, and that was over a year ago, and I was right. Liverpool had not had more
Dang.
than 2 PKs all year, which is like
Wow.
that to me is surprising too.
Yeah, that's another surprising one for sure.
Um, and just
Hmm.
do. I mean, Crystal Palace did the same thing to Leeds, and just Leeds are bad.
Yeah,
I
these are
mean,
bad. Yeah, these are bad.
yeah, because it works for 45 minutes or 35 minutes to kind of sit in a block, and it was a little unfortunate to not have the first goal maybe chalked off because it looks like Trent did kind of use his arm, but they're missing Tyler Adams, and Tyler Adams would help with keep the ball. I mean, Weston McKennie is kind of being shoehorned in to be a pivot midfielder. He's offering no defensive protection at all. Leads bad defensively, but another thing too, I don't think they're good in midfield. Um,
No. Yeah.
but Alex mentioned something about Roma, and he texted, about what they've been doing. I looked at their lineup, and I saw Diego Llorente starting for them, and I was like, "Oh, did Leeds maybe sell him?" Because I remember he had injury issues, but when he was playing, he was their best center back. And
Mhm.
no, they loaned him out, and now I don't understand. I don't
Yeah.
because why would you loan out your best center back? You didn't bring anyone in. You brought Werber in. Obviously you're missing him, but that's it. That's all you've done. And Firpo has a mistake, I think, for one of the goals. You're bad at fullback. Christensen was allowed Diego Jota to just run behind him for I think the third goal. You're bad on fullback, bad center back. Melier can be hit and miss.
Melia hasn't been
They
great.
placed
Yeah,
they
and
replaced Marsh, someone that for someone a little bit more pragmatic, as they say, and you can play anti-football and you can play in a block all you want. You still got to defend. They can't defend.
oh no, and they've conceded a league high 60 goals as well. Just stats that further back up the proof that the defense is just horrible. Honestly,
I mean, in both games, it was a 1 goal game. It was a 1-1 at Palace versus Palace. It was maybe even like 2-1 at one point. Yeah, 2-1 in the second half. It was 2-1 in early in the second half here. And just they completely gave up, almost, because you just see, teams are able to run at them, and it's not just Liverpool. Palace did it last week.
yeah. I wonder they have scored 40 goals, which is a lot. It's almost double the teams around them. You do wonder, like, if they just spent a little bit of money on their defense and got them a little bit better, how much further up the table they would be because they scored a lot.
Why did they spend all that money on Jorginho Rutter if they're not? He didn't start this game. He came on the bench.
Yeah.
Why? I understand they worried about Patrick Bamford, but who made that decision? If it was Marsh, if it was someone else, someone else should have gotten the door, not Marsh, because that's
Mhm. Yeah.
who made that decision should be fired. That was the fireable decision. That's gonna be why they get relegated, by not
It could be.
by not using
Yeah,
that rudder
not betting
money
on a
to
defender
actually bring
instead.
in some defensive help.
Yeah, because their goal differential isn't that bad. It's -20, which, when you say they've conceded 60 goals, you'd be like, I bet their goal difference is -35. But they yeah managed to score 40 goals, which is a lot. The teams around them are 24, 24, 29. So they've almost doubled the scoring with the teams that are around them. So we can firmly place the blame on the defense for sure.
And we're
I
moving
don't
on.
think the midfield is good either, like you said.
No, because I mean,
But
because I don't. Yeah, they were still not necessarily in great form with Tyler Adams, as well. But yeah, it's just they did beat Forest in a head to head a couple of weeks ago, and that's looking like I don't necessarily think it'll matter because I think both will go down.
yeah,
But that could maybe be a really big 3 points or a 6 pointer, down the stretch
yeah,
if it comes down to
6
Forest
point swing.
or Leeds. Yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
another team that they are dealing with is Everton, and there's a chance here for Everton to kind of get one on Fulham. Fulham haven't been in the best form. They don't have Mitrovic, as they said, and they did something I would have not expected. Because I was trying to think, well, what are they going to do? Missing Mitrovic. Obviously the answer was try Vinicius, Carlos Vinicius, who they've tried, who's also kind of a makeshift striker. And this game, he tried Dan James, and it
yeah.
worked. So I
Or
don't know if we'll see that again, but I mean, Everton had no idea how to defend this, and so we get started with a Harrison Reed goal, and the only thing to say here is it was good to see Harrison Reed bounce back because he had the own goal last week that he was kind of upset at himself about, and that ended up being kind of the decider last week. So, and then Everton get one back with Dwight McNeil in the middle, and I'm going to get to this later on. I think if Everton have issues everywhere, I think you can maybe try Demarai Gray left wing. Try Dwight McNeil as your striker, because
ooh,
he's bigger than you think. I think he's like 5'11", maybe even 6 foot. But the way he's able to control this, he gets the ball in the middle. He has a really good couple touches, and he has a fantastic shot on him to score this. he looks comfortable playing in the middle. Now, this only happened because there was a kind of a loose ball or whatnot, so there was a little chaos. He wasn't necessarily asked to kind of be in the middle; he just kind of was,
Mhm.
but he took it well. And unless Dominic Calvert-Lewin can return, they're going to need to do something else than what they've been doing. So why not?
Yeah. Yeah, why not? They need to figure something out because, you can't rely on Calvert-Lewin to be healthy. Sims is just a little too young still, so they need to start, just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, honestly, just seeing what happens. And Mape hasn't been that good either. They need to figure something out at striker for sure
And
because,
they and they
I mean,
that
it's been a crucial part of their whole season all year. They haven't had a
That is
striker.
that is another thing too. We did see something different. So in the past, we have seen kind of a three-man midfield, and with basically one striker. We saw two strikers. We saw Mapai played with Damari Gray, and you're right, that did not necessarily work out. Mapai did have a chance to score, and he didn't necessarily have the best touch. And the keeper Elena actually did a really good job to stop it. Um, but yeah, we're focusing on the offense, but this stat kind of blowed me away. Now, they were so bad versus Man United in the first half, maybe that's why, but they've given up 50 looks against them in the last 2 games. Now, it's one thing to be bad offensively to score goals. You're allowing teams to have a free run at your goalkeeper. Now,
Yeah,
and versus Man United, they were just playing a high line. In this game, it was just they could not stop Everton or Fulham getting the ball upfield and being able to take cracks at you. And it's one thing to get done by Rashford running at you, Martial, United's attacking court, Anthony. It was Harry Wilson and Dan James here. So
yeah.
this was rough.
Yeah, yeah, it was rough. It was not a good game for Everton. It's not the Everton we've seen with Deitch in charge. They weren't really, compact defensively, and
We're not.
they weren't as hard to break down as they have been. So a little bit of an off day for Deitch and boys at Everton.
I mean, the XG was 1.3 to 1.8 for Fulham, but 21 shots and 7. I mean, Everton did have 15 shots and 7 on goal themselves. Everton did have 4 chances created. They just missed. So
Yeah, they just
that,
missed.
that kind of gets to that. So I guess that is basically kind of it to say. I mean, do you have anything else to add for that game?
No, just yeah, a little bit surprising. It seemed like Fulham were kind of going, you know, trending down, but and Everton were kind of trending up a little bit, but now it seems to kind of have switched a little bit. And Everton are, I mean, obviously firmly in the relegation. They got to figure some stuff out. They got to figure someone out for striker that can score just a little bit, just a couple of goals for him. Because it's coming down to crunch time, and we don't really. I don't think Dominic Calvert-Lewin will play, uh, and Ellis Sims isn't going to score.
It
And
might
I mean, they had plenty of shots and a decent amount of target. They just need to find him to put the ball in the back of the net.
it might have to come to that. I mean, it is worth saying that they are missing. They didn't have Onana this game. Um,
They don't have Decore either.
Nope,
Yeah,
and they're missing
missing some guy.
Decore. So that's the reason why when
That could be.
Onana and Decore and Idrissa Gueye were kind of playing in that middle three, they were actually able to kind of make that pitch look really small because of the kind of ground that they can all cover. So
Oh
that
yeah,
is and they're able to
solid midfield
they're able
three.
to win the ball back, and that helps you kind of get a little bit more transition moments, and you can be a little more attack minded that way. That also helps your the back line out by having a midfield that can do that. So this isn't going to be the Everton that we see for the final 8 games. So that's what we're
Right.
saying as well. But
Yeah.
it definitely was a missed opportunity because away at Goodison, a chance to get maybe 3 points. Fulham probably didn't think they were on a lot of momentum or a lot
Yeah.
of things to be high about. I mean, they're safe in the table. There's not a ton for them to play for. But
Mhm.
maybe that's
Yeah.
why you play someone like Dan James and Harry Wilson because they have a chance. They haven't played a lot this season. Here's a chance for them to show what they can do, and they did.
Yeah. Take a climb out for the starting job for the rest of the season. Yeah, definitely.
And with you mentioned Calvert Lewin, he came back for like 3 games last season, and he had a monster he had a monster goal versus I think Crystal Palace, and they ended up beating Crystal Palace. I think it was also at Everton, the second game of the year, to help them stay up. Maybe it's going to need something like that. He needs to come back, and just have a 2 game stretch where he helps them out.
Yeah, maybe.
'Cause
Yeah.
I think he the last game he did play in I think he did play versus Arsenal. Well, unfortunate for you guys when they were able to kind of get something.
Well, the first game, yeah, the first time, yeah, yeah, I think he did. Phew.
And that is that. We'll move on to. I'm trying to run quickly, Rex.
Yeah,
S- s-
go.
I mean Southampton and Crystal Palace. This one ends 0-2. I think the only thing to say here is as a started got 2 goals. Not a lot happened in this game until like the 55th minute when Eze really did show some quality. The second goal for people that haven't seen it, I would kind of look that up because it's not something that you normally see from an English midfielder. The only thing I can think of is why was Eze not starting under Patrick Vieira because he's come in and almost single-handedly kind of lifted Palace out of this because
Yeah,
this is without Zaha. Zaha was their leading goal scorer. Everything was going through Zaha. At Palace were not necessarily great this game. 9 shots and only 2 on target. The 2 shots came from Eze.
yeah, he's been great. I don't know why he wasn't playing.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's so weird.
I mean,
But good on Hutchin bringing him back in. Hutchin probably was like, he needs to start, and he's rewarding Hodgson for playing him.
he's a player that's not afraid to play clever passes in the final third or take plays on. He's a really good dribbler. He like glides with the ball. And
Yeah,
he's really good technically. He gets the ball. He's got really good touches with it, and he can change his pace. And he's coming back from an Achilles as well. So it's good to see that hasn't necessarily. It's taken a while for him to recover.
yeah,
Because that happened, I think, before COVID or right around COVID.
I think so. Yeah,
So
yeah, right around it.
that's really good to see, and, again, he's something unique. You don't normally see this from English midfielders, and I saw a graph. He's completed the most dribbles since April, since the start of April.
Really? Wow.
Again, he's he wasn't being played, and he's come for the last, like, 3 or 4 games. He's been fresh, and he showed it.
Yeah, 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 and yeah. I mean, it's been great to watch him, and I mean, we really were worried about that injury. It's such a tough injury to come back from. But he seems to have put it all behind him, and now that he's got a different manager, and Hodgson's showing the faith in him, and as he's going out there and playing well, maybe this is something that Palace can use next year too. Because if they don't have Zaha, they need someone, and Eze looks like he could possibly step up and fill that spot, at least partially fill the spot if Zaha leaves.
And, another thing that's worth saying is, people I was kind of one of the doubters as well. Why are you bringing Hodgson in? Maybe, is this gonna is this gonna work out or not? The fact that he's just played as a has made this the right call. I honestly
Yeah,
do think it was all that took. Now we did see Palace, have a shot barrage the last 2 games, and this one they only had 9 and 2 on target. And that to me is the old Hodgson ball under when he was at Crystal Palace. But it doesn't matter because I
yeah,
think he's got 3. I think it's 3 wins on the spin, and
yeah.
they control their own fate now. They've played themselves out of this entirely, and
Yeah.
good
Yeah,
for
I
them.
think they're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for them, and it's funny, like, as soon as they got rid of Vieira and got Hodgson, the results immediately, changed, and they got the 3 wins in a row, and I think this is what, some of those relegation teams are hoping for when they fire their manager is that they do get, like, a 3 game manager bounce because that might be enough to
Yep.
get you out
It's good.
and into safety, and for Palace, it is. I mean, because they were 12th, which wasn't low, but they were still only, like, 2 or 3 points
Right.
out of the
It was
relegation
always the
zone
points.
when
Yeah.
Vieira was fired.
And the only
Mhm, mhm.
the counter to that is West Ham had that look, and all they did was they threatened Moyes, and he was like, his team
I
responded
mean, hey,
that way as well. So
yep,
there are two
yeah,
ways to go about it, and obviously it hasn't worked for
yeah,
Chelsea. That Lampard's gotten
mhm,
the opposite of a manager bump.
yeah,
And with Southampton, I mentioned it kind of at the start of the show. We didn't pencil them in last week. I'm ready to maybe do that, to be honest,
yeah,
because
me too.
maybe Che Adams can come in and do a save job. They do have some talented players. They do have Romeo Lavia. It's the youngest team I think in the league. I think that shows up as
Yeah,
well. It seems like they're trying Kyle Walker Peters on the left side, so they're getting Matt Lanau's a go at right back. That hasn't necessarily worked out these last couple of games either. It's a team that you just other than like when Walcott's getting a couple looks and goal and they can't keep him down. Arnacho isn't necessarily working for them. Seiko Mara
yeah,
isn't working for them. It's a shame because I feel like I think I mentioned it last week or maybe even before you had left. I wish this team had Armando Broja this season.
hmm.
Um,
Would've been interesting, yeah, for sure.
I mean, he's been hurt all year, so you can't necessarily
Yeah,
he wouldn't necessarily be able to help them now. But if he wasn't hurt and he
right.
was able to play, it feels like they're missing something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they had him, and it's kind of interesting too because we kind of thought it was the same way with Palace and Gallagher, another Chelsea. Without
Really
him,
good,
they kind of
really good
look
call.
different.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now they're starting to finally find something without him. But yeah, it was kind of the same with me, and neither one at Chelsea are really impressed towards ACL. But Gallagher hasn't done too much either, and he's not regularly playing. So yeah, they're kind of similar in that regard, where they had a Chelsea loanee, and then they left and didn't really replace them, and now they're starting to struggle because of that.
Yeah, the risk and reward of relying on a loanee from one of those top clubs is not being able to plan ahead when that doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily when you can't bring them back next season.
yeah, you
Um,
got to replace him if you can't bring him back.
and then we'll move on to we'll finish off with Wolves and Brentford. Like you mentioned, it hasn't been a good 5 games for Brentford. I don't think they've won. They do have a couple draws, and other than like this Wolves game, and I think it was away to Wolves. It's been it's been Brighton, Man United, and Newcastle. So there's some
Mhm.
of that. The draw to Leicester,
Yeah,
I think, is looking worse and worse as we go on.
yeah.
The goal though, Diego Costa comes in and he's kind of the hero for Wolves. He looked good. He looked really fit. So
Yeah, it
there's something
was
there.
so weird. Yeah,
Uh,
maybe, I don't know.
and then Wang's able to get a second after Mateus Nunes actually does a really good job, kind of dribbling. He beats Rico Henry. And yeah, it's Wolves kind of needed the. It's a big 3 points, 2 weeks in a row, and it's come from Costa and Mateus Nunes. So there's because Wolves have always been that team that have always been kind of there. No one's really known what to do with them. They're not necessarily consistent week to week, but it looks like they maybe have enough to stay up as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Lopetegui has made the difference, I think, for Wolves here.
I mean, what do you think of Frank sticking with this idea to maybe evolve this Brentford side to go back to a 4-3-3 to kind of change it up depending on who the opposition is because uh, Jeremy gave me his thing. I kind of disagree with it. I think they should stick with a 3-5-2. Just kind of be and maybe just kind of I get the idea of like trying to evolve later on, but at least for now I don't know if they have the midfield to necessarily play that way. And I think because you can play a three kind of a compact, and you can maybe have wing backs a little bit more. In this one, you kind of forced with Hickey and Henry kind of go up. You're forcing the that midfield three to cover a little bit more ground than maybe they should. I don't know if Jensen has the legs for that, and I don't know if De Silva is necessarily good enough to just kind of start.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah, they're just starting to run out of steam a little bit. Which like last year they started to run out of steam and then they got Ericsson. But I mean they'll be in the Premier League at least next
Right,
year. But they will
right.
have to figure some things
It's
out for
more
sure.
on it's more on worrying about how a team usually finishes is almost sometimes that carries on into the start of next season.
Absolutely.
And
Yep, and that's a concern for sure.
you
And you
mentioned
don't know about Tony either.
right,
So next
you
year, so
mentioned Tony. I think that's worth saying as well. Everything's kind of changed since like that the news of that announcement came on or the investigation kind of went forward. I think that's kind of coincided with some of this. So maybe that's he did kind of score a PK versus it wasn't versus Newcastle. It was
no, it wasn't Newcastle. Well, he missed one and then scored.
he
Yeah.
missed that, but there was a game a couple of weeks ago when it was maybe his first time when he was after the investigation had been announced. Might have been Southampton where he scored, and I guess it didn't bother him.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you're right,
Hmm.
it did miss and it did have a couple chances towards the end here to at least maybe make it 2-1. A couple of really good saves by Jose Sa. That's worth
Oh
saying,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
yeah, Brentford have kind of in that weird situation where you don't really know what they have to play for either, but you need them to pick up a little kind of confidence because I looked at who
Yeah.
they play the last game of the season. It's away to the community stadium. Do you know who it is?
Ooh. Is it? I don't know. Is it Liverpool?
It is a team that they have already beaten this season,
Chelsea.
Man City.
Oh, City is at the end. Ooh, interesting. Huh.
So I don't know. I don't know if it'll necessarily come down to that or not, but that could be fun.
Wow, that could be fun.
Maybe not necessarily for you, but fun for the neutrals. And I guess that's kind of it. I mean, we do have I guess kind of like real quickly. I think my bottom three, I do have Leeds, Forest, and Southampton. I do think Everton just barely escape, and maybe Leicester somehow able to kind of get a win here and there, kind of get above Everton. But that's kind of the
Ooh.
way I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I think I have Southampton definitely in last place. I don't think there's any getting out of that. And then I think I would go. Tough. I think I would go Leeds for sure. I just like we talked about their defense is just dreadful. And then I'm just stuck between Nottingham Forest and Everton. I'm not sure which of the two will have enough to make it out. I think right now I would agree with you. I think Everton's going to be okay, and I think I would probably put Nottingham Forest as that last team relegated.
It is kind of lame what I'm doing because yeah, I'm kind of going on basically Bournemouth I actually think would be there for goal differential and defense, but I'm not necessarily picking like one of those traditional like EPL clubs. We kind of need a big one to go down. I think that's what kind of would kind of change. I don't know,
Like if a West Ham was in there or something.
or like an Everton, or even
Everton.
even a Leicester. Just something like a big name. I went with like Leeds. Leeds are traditionally big, but yeah. And
But
then,
newer to the brand.
real quickly, Champions League is today. So I'm glad we're not doing the show tomorrow, where we didn't necessarily have to fit in. Napoli do trail AC Milan in a team that they don't like playing them recently because basically AC Milan beat them 4-0 recently. But Osimhen didn't play that day, so maybe we'll see him again.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it. Valvasquelia, but Rafael Leao can pose his own danger, and then.
right one. Absolutely.
Madrid are only 2-0 over Chelsea. So I think if
Mhm.
Chelsea can find it, maybe Felix can get something, maybe Havertz can wake up. If they can just find a way to get that first goal, this gets a little bit more interesting because Madrid have been helter skelter this whole year. Now they've been better in the Champions League, but in the league they've
Yeah,
been weird.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I don't think this is done and dusted yet. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, if Chelsea come out and score that first goal, it's going to be a lot of pressure on Madrid. Anything can happen for sure.
and just find a way to not let Vinny Jr. embarrass you the
Oof,
way
it's gonna
they
be
were,
tough.
or find a way to Enzo. That this is why what Lampard did like last week was really poor because he was behind Enzo kind of in that DM pivot, and he didn't really have a defensive midfielder versus Chelsea of all teams. But Enzo also doesn't recognize I guess the defensive duties where if Cruz gets the ball, follow him. Do not let Cruz, and Cruz will kind of drop deep too. Do not let Cruz dictate the play. He can be 40 years old and doesn't have legs, but Cruz is amazing at just spreading the ball out wide, and he creates problems by himself.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And then,
It'll be fun.
that is it. I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to that. I think if as long as Madrid doesn't get the first goal, if that is, it'll be tie over. But if Chelsea can't get that
Oh.
first goal, this gets fun. This gets interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. It's going to be a good week,
And
interesting week of soccer.
Don Lampard getting one over Don Ancelotti would actually make fun for takes too. So we'll see if it happens.
Ah,
All right. Thank you. That's our show. We did try to. I went a little wrong, Max, but I didn't do the 240 this time. You got anything left to say?
no, just looking forward to Champions League this weekend. The weekend coming up too should be a good weekend of soccer. A good week too.
And I wish you guys, I guess, luck for Friday because Arsenal will have a Friday game,
Southampton Friday. Yeah, that's
and
right. Yeah,
it'll be FA Cup weekend for a couple of these teams.
for some.
Man City,
Yeah,
you've got Sheffield. Is it Sheffield? Man City got
yeah,
some team in the championship, and they a loanee I think is McAtee, who's actually been a big player for them. So I don't know if he'll necessarily play. They will probably have to watch for that. And then Brighton versus Man United is kind of tasty. So we'll see. We'll see if that pans out. So
yeah,
I'm looking.
definitely.
I'll be looking forward to that because I don't really care who Liverpool until they can close that gap. I don't really care who they play. Just as long as they can score six and Trent Alexander-Arnold looks looks as good as he did last game. So, anyways,
Yeah,
uh, I guess thanks again for joining. And then I guess that's it for our show. You can find us on the YouTube channel, or we do have we are on Spotify as well. Reserve Squad Midweek. I've been trying to upload those a little bit better. I have been kind of lazy in the past, but that's it. So want to thank you guys for listening and joining in. And until next week, you stay squatty
this squad. Thanks for listening.
and stop recording.